Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. We have a different group here in studio with us right now. So I'm going to run actually on this side and kind of go around. First, we have our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
Myself, Coach Jonathan Lee, of course. And then we have one of our product managers here at TrainerRoad, but also Team Cliff Bar Racing's Pete Morris.
Howdy, guys.
Good to have you, Pete.
Yeah, I love being here. It's the best.
Yeah. And an extra special guest, repeat guest on the podcast. You have been on it before. We're super excited to have you here. Lee McCormack from Lee Likes Bikes. How's it going, man?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are the MTB skills instructor that we all need all the time, basically, if I'm to introduce you. But you're also you're more than that because you've invented products. You're a thinker. You're also, I consider you my shred shaman as well. Exactly right. And if you can join us on YouTube, which you can, usually it's every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, but it's Wednesday this time because we're taking advantage of Lee while we have him here. We're having him jump into the studio, but you can join in on YouTube. So you could have seen Lee doing praying hands there when I said shred shaman and other great things.
Threw you a namaste.
Exactly. So, but we are going to cover some of the cycling questions that you submitted in an indirect way today because we get a good amount of questions on bike handling, not just how do I put out more watts, but how do I control myself in other situations.
Yeah, utilize those watts, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna have a discussion on skills, bike handling. And we've been doing a clinic with you, Nate, you for the past 2 days in a row. Pete and I joined yesterday. And of course, I went through the clinic with you before. And yesterday was just as impactful, if not more impactful than the first time even, just to go through and we went through a lot of similar things. We went through different things as well, but even from the similar stuff, I gleaned a lot of info. So I'm excited. It's going to be great. First things first, though, some congrats are in order. First of all, and we're going to go through Leadville because I just did that one, so we'll go through that. But Rose Grant won Leadville, which was really impressive. I think she did like a 7:30, something like that. Fast time.
We sponsor her.
I know, of course. Yeah, we are sponsors of the Stan's Pivot team presented by Maxxis Tires. Pretty awesome stuff. Rose really wanted to. She's the current marathon champion. So, with that team, the Palmares this year is insane. The amount of wins. We covered that last week. Now just add a title for Leadville on there. Then Chloe Woodruff, I believe, got 6th at the World Cup in Lenzerheide, Switzerland. Amazing job. Really awesome to see. And she was present all the time, like bridging up from groups and racing really aggressively. And
I got to work with her years ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and do some skills work. And as you can imagine, she's quite the athlete.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
We did one lap at the Nationals XCO course up in Winter Park this year, and I had done a couple laps. Then it was her. I believe it was Ryan Standish, perhaps, or no, Alexi Vermeulen, who is a ex-roadie and now mountain biker, and then Keegan Swenson. I had done it before, and I ripped through it darn near race pace, and then it was just a train, and she just holds right in. Yeah. She is a better technical rider than many, many, many of the men out there. Many of them. And
many of them.
Yes, that's the thing that I'm getting at.
It's 5 many.
Yes, I would say that she's ranking top 5 in the men's field. She has and it's tricky because she's really small. She's not very tall. So then, as a result, you kind of deal with always some strange things with bike fit, right, Lee?
Yeah, it's hard to get something that fits correctly, and the small riders don't have massive range of motion, so they have to ride with a different style.
Yeah.
Can I share a story?
Please, yeah.
So we were out.
That's what we're here for.
We were working in Prescott, and we were working on drops, right? But not big huck drop, more like a ledge, a steep, big ledge that led into a corner. And so in the beginning, everybody in the group was just really having a hard time. Even I roll up and I'm like, okay, guys, this is what we're going to ride. And most everybody's like, really? But then I do my spiel and then everybody's riding it. And I remember the moment when Chloe came up on it and she hadn't quite executed it yet. And I saw her eyes go to the next corner. And she was planning the corner and then she executed the drop perfectly. And I was like, that's mastery right there. That's the moment.
Yeah.
Right? She was executing move A while she was planning move B. I thought that was really cool.
That's super interesting that you say that. I was looking through just this morning through photos that we had of national championships, actually for the feature image that you can see on YouTube for this one. And I ended up using a picture of Keegan on this one because it fit the aspect ratio we needed. But there are a number of pictures of Chloe. She does such a good job of looking ahead. Mm-hmm. When if you look like even on her Instagram, go to her Instagram, look up Chloe Woodruff, and you look at a lot of the stuff. When she's in something, she's always like, she's to the next thing. She does a really good job of it.
That's a really huge key to riding safely, smoothly, and of course, quickly.
Yeah.
Huge. And on the road too, right?
Yeah.
Look into the turn you're going to go to. Mm-hmm.
Totally. It's a reason we should all have a Yamaha R1 1000 CEC Superbike, because then you have to look like 10 miles ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So congrats to them. And then Keegan is at Breck Epic right now, and I believe he won stages 1 through 3. I know he won stages 1 and 2. I couldn't really find results for stage 3 yesterday. But
yeah, he did win.
He got it. It's really impressive. So hopefully he can clean sweep that one. That would be cool. And also, good luck to all the listeners right now, podcast listeners who are racing Breck Epic, because there are many of them. So that looks like a really tough race.
Yeah, I heard it was a tough day too. It was like lots of rain and muddy. And
Day 1 was like a ton of rain. Then yesterday they crossed the Continental Divide twice. They climbed 7,000 feet in I think like 30 or 40 miles, and they ended up going through snow fields, the whole stuff. It's an adventure, man. So Leadville, let's get into that. First things first. Thank you to so many people that we saw up there. It was really cool. Brandon, our product manager, also came with me. Chad and his fiancee Amarette, they were up there, and there were so many TrainerRoad users, so many podcast listeners, everything else. It was so cool to meet all of you, whether it was on course, whether you were cheering on the side of the course, which is great, handing me cold towels or water or whatever else. That was awesome. But then also just chatting with you all, swapping polls, the whole thing. It was pretty great. Nate, I'm going to share some quick summary of it, and then I want you to critique the performance, because I think you have some opinions on this one. You've said that you were going to hold it for the podcast a few times. So I did an 8-hour, 14-minute time. That's roughly 12.1 miles an hour average, right? For those that, and if you want like specifics on the exact route of Leadville, for those that are familiar with it or not, I'm going to pull that up right now. So basically, it's known for having really big, long climbs, which it absolutely does, but they're extremely steep is the other thing. But basically, this one, it's 104 miles is what I ended up doing, and it was just under 12,500 feet of climbing.
Okay, chainring.
Mm-hmm.
You had Eagle. What was your front size chainring?
32.
When people, you're not a normal person.
Yeah.
When people are debating,
yeah.
Should they have a 32 or a 30 or even a 28?
28.
20, right?
Everyone was walking.
Yeah, full on 28.
Yes, yeah. There were like it's funny when there were very few times when I was pedaling and felt spun out. Like I actually don't even know if there was a single time.
So you did an 814 and you didn't need a 32.
No way.
On the flat sections, because that's what you always hear about in the forums.
Yeah, you're gonna spin out.
Okay, let's just settle this right now.
28.
So if you're going 8 hours, go with 30.
Yeah, sure.
And then anything, if you're slower than 8 hours, 28.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is pick your gearing for the crucial times and those climbs. So Columbine, and first of all, Columbine, everyone makes a really big deal about Columbine, and I get it because you go up to 12,600 feet. That's really high. For those that don't know, that's quite high. So you don't have much. When you push on the pedals, just not a whole lot happens when you're up that high, right? I remember thinking at one point, I'm like, I'm moving. And then like I glanced down at the watch and I'm like, I'm doing 180 watts, which for me, that's, a threshold around 305. It's not very much, right? So Columbine's tough, don't get me wrong. And it is tough when you get up to the top, it gets steeper. But Pipeline is just extremely hard. Like that one is way harder because it's way steeper. And then psychologically speaking, it's really tough. Because
were you able to just do the whole thing feet up?
Yeah, so I had to walk for about 5 feet on both climbs, and that was due to just people in front, So of walking, and then get back on. You could carry on, but yeah, you could carry on. I could with the 3250. I could spin up, but you have to plan your gearing for those moments, and you have to think worst case scenario because you were going to feel so far from ideal. Like I don't care what you can climb when you're fresh. I don't care what you can climb in a 1 to 2 hour ride. When you're 7 hours, 6 hours into your ride,
It's a little different.
And you're at elevation, then it's totally different.
What I hear about on forums and stuff is that people are concerned that, like, so they like, yeah, I need a lot of gear for these climbs, but they're concerned that in the packs on the flats, they're going to be going 38 miles per hour and you're going to somehow get dropped.
That's my second point that I really want to make. Like, everyone feels like they have to be in a group, right? And they kill themselves to bridge up to a group. In my mind, sit up and wait for a group, because it's not the day to try to bridge and do hard efforts unless you're a crazy athlete and you're really, really good and you know you're well within yourself. That's one thing. But like, I was with a group we came down Power Line, and then it's like a long stretch all the way until Columbine. It has some climbing toward the end when you get closer to that. And some guy was like, let's do a pace line. Let's work together. And I was like, all right. So we started working together, and I was like, this dude's pushing like 330 watts right now. Like, this is ridiculous. And in that moment, I was like, we'll see you guys later. I'm just going to cruise by myself. It's much better to cruise by yourself in the wind, solo, within yourself, than to be absolutely blowing yourself up to catch to a group where you're probably going to blow yourself up again. And the reason I say that is because the groups are far from like what you have in a road race. Like, the groups in a road race, a lot of the time, the pace, when you sit in, the pace is really consistent. It's very rare that it's like extremely surgy, but not with these folks, because they aren't used to riding in a group. So they get to the front and they're like, I'm on the Tour de France. I've seen this before.
Right.
And what I have to do is go as hard as I can, and there's going to be people on the side cheering, smoke bombs. I'm going to get a yellow jersey, right? That's like in their mind. Like, they're at the front of a group of cyclists. So they do that, and then they just hammer it. And so these little groups that you see, they are not the safe harbors of efficiency that you hope they are. What they really are is a group of riders that are riding inefficiently. So you don't want to be with that.
If you're on the road and it's flat and you're pulling a pace line, and when you're in the pack, in the draft, you're making 100 units of power, how many units of power would you generally make when it's your pull? Like, how much would you go up?
Yeah, so like, Pete, you can probably
30 or 40% more.
So it's not like night and day
but,
much.
But the interesting thing is, if I'm in the group, if I'm in the group, if I'm in the group, it doesn't feel like an acceleration though, right? When Pete goes to the front and it's his turn, or when you go to the front, it doesn't feel like an acceleration. You're just putting out more because you're pushing more wind.
Right.
But at the same time, the speed of the group is like relative, or the effort of the group is relative.
I think too at Leadville. So like, when you're in a group like that, there's like two kind of phases of the group. One is the single file line, and that's when you're hauling pretty fast, right?
Yep.
That's the one where it can get pretty dangerous for efficiency, because and then an acceleration happens and someone opens a gap and they accelerate, and then this like accordion thing happens where there's more acceleration. The nice one on the road is when it's fanned out and you're 5-10 across and you're all in this like peloton. Then it's so easy.
Yes, that's a good sign that you know it's easy.
And I think that's where, if you could get those kind of pods, like 30 riders floating across the dirt together, it would be a lot. I think people would save a lot more energy that way. And still go pretty fast.
I think mountain bikers don't understand quite as well how to manage a pace over rolling terrain too. That's one thing that, like, Pete, when I'm riding with you, or, even like at Cliff Camp, right? Really fast pro racer guys. You jump in. When we're going over rolling terrain, the effort is modulated.
It's sort of consistent, right? Considering...
Yeah. It's not like they get to a hill and they just jam and they go really hard. And I think for a lot of riders, that's really difficult to do. It's so easy for us to put out more wattage when the hill forces it upon us. And then it's much harder for us to proactively put that down when we're going slightly downhill, something like that. But really good groups, you'll notice that the wattage is more or less consistent. The speed will vary over rolling terrain. They don't keep it perfectly consistent unless they're trying to, shoot people out the back.
Yeah, and one of the things is, you'll notice, like, we always ride two abreast, and two people on the front makes everything is much easier, and it kind of removes a bunch of like intricacies of pack dynamics. So that makes a smoother ride for everybody. Everybody works a little less, actually. And so two abreast, I don't think we can change the way people ride Leadville, but ride two abreast and ride two back from that, and it's a way easier ride for everyone involved.
Yeah, completely agree. Some other notable things on that. So first of all, on the data points, I did two. I wanted to stick, I figured I'd be somewhere around 180. 187, I think, normalized power is what it said, but I was 180 average power, 209 normalized power for the 8 hours. That was about 0.7-ish IF, roughly where I'm at there. And it was 380 TSS. It's always tricky to calculate, though, because, when you're at elevation that high, it's rough because your effective threshold, what you can actually put out, is so much lower. Like, I figure my threshold up there was much closer to like 265, at high points on that.
Less, right?
At high points on that course, it was closer to 240, 230. So, a whole lot lower.
I read that at 14,000 feet, there's 25% less oxygen than here. Well, not here, but than sea level.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. We're at about 5,000 feet right here. And it was about 5,300 kilojoules that I ended up taking in on that. So some notable things. We went up the day before. So with elevation, common thing, it's like go up the day of or 2 to 3 weeks. And that should give you 2 to 3 weeks, you're used to it. At that point, maybe your blood oxygen saturation levels, have normalized again and you're back to normal, that sort of a thing. We went up the day before. We flew in. We got the rental cars. We went to bike shops, did that sort of thing to get CO2s, like the little stuff we needed. And then we drove straight up to Leadville. We drove to Leadville. Then after that, we drove back to Golden to stay there. Big day.
You flew out of Reno at 6 a.m.
And we flew out of Reno at 6 a.m. So that's a 3 a.m. wake up call, basically. So we flew out at 6 a.m. And then after we flew out at 6 a.m., we ended up getting back to the house at around, I think, 6 or 7 p.m. And then at that point, we had to build bikes. So we built our bikes, and then
it's ideal,
got in
right?
some dinner.
Yeah. You're describing the ideal prep.
Yeah. So going in, and then we had another 3 a.m. wake up call, right? Because we had to drive up. First of all, the traffic was no issue whatsoever getting into Leadville. I know people have talked about that before, and I-70 has really bad traffic. I mean, Lee, you're from that region, so you know.
Yeah, it can be really bad.
The day on Friday, it was stop and go almost the whole way up to Leadville, like in a lot of sections. But that morning, it was totally fine. We were just able to drive right in, find parking, no issue. But I don't think it was ideal. If I could do that again.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. If I could do it again, we'd fly in Thursday, pick up the numbers on Thursday, and then Friday would just be like a full-on, practically a spa day, right?
What if
just
you had
like
a
full
Swan
relax.
Year to do it all on Friday for you?
That would be amazing.
But you can't have someone else pick up your packet, right?
No, you have to be you.
Yeah. I always dislike
Although
that.
the thing is, it's not completely that way. Like if you're a pro race team,
Yeah, your director
the
picks it up.
director picks it up,
I
right?
know.
So,
I've always.
I feel like
It
there's
would
got to
help
be a way to
people
get
so
around it.
much, but
I know.
what they don't want to do is have someone else race for you.
Yeah.
But I feel like someone could always just did you have a wristband?
Yeah.
But someone could
But
always.
you could
get around it so
Yeah,
easily.
totally.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
You smart people can figure out how to get a wristband from one person's wrist to another person's wrist.
Yeah, exactly.
If
It
I
would
do a
be
race
much
series,
better.
anyone can pick up the packet.
There we go. I like
There
that. So I feel like that was better. The other thing, the front corrals, I was able to just slot right in. I was in the silver corral. So there's gold, silver, then many other colors, like many rainbows, basically. I can't keep it all straight, right? And it goes back
All
from
those
there.
people behind you.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not worried about those people.
No, don't
All
take it
those
that way.
civilians behind you.
Oh, come on, no. It's just I don't know which colors are behind. That's all I'm getting at.
You don't concern yourself with such things.
Gosh, all right, moving on. It's really tough if you show up. Like we showed up at like 5:50, and then the race started at 6:30. And by the time we got out of the car, of course, put the Anvil Amp-Human lotion all over ourselves, and basically bathed in it, right? And then got everything ready. We got down to the start line at like 6:15, 6:20, right?
Brandon's story is a little bit different than yours, but there was not enough time for Brandon to do all the things he wanted to do that morning.
Brandon was a little panicked. Yeah. I feel like I was pretty calm and got in. But the thing is, when Brandon, he was in the red corral.
Yeah, red.
When he
One
filtered
behind
into the red corral, it was like, there's only room at the very back and you better squeeze in. But in the silver corral, it was like, come on in, plenty of room. It was like a spaced out area. So,
elite section.
Well, yeah, but that's just the thing. Like, if you are in a further back corral, you should plan on getting there earlier.
Yeah.
Because basically, if you're at the back of your corral,
if you want to be at the front of the corral.
Yep, if you're at the back of your corral, you are going to effectively be in the next corral behind you. That's once it goes, because they don't have wave starts or anything like that.
What kind of warm up do you do for like an 8-hour race?
None. Yeah, there's no point. And here's the main reason why there's no point to warm up for Leadville, which I saw people on rollers and I was like, this is crazy. But you roll downhill for quite a while. And then after that, it's kind of flat and rolling. And then it gets into a big climb. And if you're further back, you're going to have to walk that climb. Like a lot of people walk that climb. It's
so congested.
St. Kevin's. Yeah. So it's really steep. In our group, we didn't have to walk the climb. It was nice. There weren't enough, there were riders that were riding it. And we were able to just, pedal up. But the thing is, too, you don't go all out on that climb. So you really don't need to warm up. And it's such a long day. You kind of get to the point where you're ready to go.
That's interesting. I would feel like I would need to do just my normal daily opener PT.
Yeah.
Hip stretching.
Oh, that would be great.
That's one thing for sure.
Like the activation
Yep.
protocol for sure.
And probably get on the machine and do some reps, the rip row.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to open up. Because once I do that, I'm pretty open the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I don't think you need a traditional bike warm up for the normal reasons that you would warm up. But that sort of thing, absolutely. Get your body into its functional state for sure.
Right.
So that's one thing. Also, if there's a line for the restroom because the line was insanely long, and I bet people missed the start because of that, just find a nearby construction site. That's what we did. So we just parked by a little construction site, and there were sandy huts there. So easy little pro tip that you can do. Okay, equipment, full suspension was definitely the way to go. This is not a road race like people say. Definitely not, but it is far from anything that I would call technical.
But could you have done it on a cross bike?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. Yes. 100% it's possible, right? But if you want to have a faster, more enjoyable day, you'll be faster on that cross bike on a good amount of the sections, but I think you'll lose a lot of time in other sections.
Would you have been faster?
I don't know.
I was on the Jonathan doing it on an open train. I really wanted that to happen.
I wanted it too.
Yeah.
So, okay. Lee's here too. I'm a bit of a hype man for Jonathan.
Yes, you're a great hype man.
I think
I need to have you with me at all times.
Other than your parents, I might be the second person in your life who hypes you the most.
It's great. Yeah.
Lee, you've now ridden a bunch with Jonathan, and I try to tell people how good Jonathan is. And on the
this is my cue to blush.
I know. On the descents at Leadville, you think you got 4 or 5 top 10 trophies? Do you remember how many?
Yeah, I think 5. Yeah,
5 top 10 trophies, and this is over many, many years of pros and thousands of people racing this race. And you too got slowed down. You weren't in the pro field. People were ahead of you, and you had to pass people on the descents.
Yeah, nonstop.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, that should tell you something. But Lee too, is Jonathan any good?
He's very, 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 very good.
Thank you.
Like way, way, way outside the bell curve. Very good.
He's not like Richie Rude level.
No way. And that's been proven. I raced the same
But I
courses
feel like
he
most
did at the
people
same
don't
time.
know people as good as Jonathan.
No. He's wherever you are out there in the universe, that really fast woman you ride with who's just at another level, or the fast dude who's at another level. There are infinite levels above that. And Jonathan's 7 clicks up.
7 clicks.
Up that stairway.
7 clicks.
That stairway
Nice.
goes all the way up to the giant who lives in the clouds. Yeah, Jonathan's good. And you know what? To my eye, right? Like you have. Is this third person or second?
As you choose.
Okay, I'll talk to you. Your mobility is spot on. Like we cleaned it up a little bit yesterday, right? But you have the potential to have perfect mechanics, and that's what I see is like you ride super clean, and then of course your power is way outside. So in my mind, like there's really no ceiling for how fast you can get, and given all the attention you put into endurance training, if you just put more energy into descending, take your SB 150 out to North Star more, you'd be. I think you're already pro fast, but you'd be full on pro fast.
Yeah, I blame my dad for that. Thanks, Dad. He just used to like beat into my head over and over technique on all the things that we did. So yeah. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate that. Hey, on descents, can we talk about that really quick at Leadville?
I have an opinion too about Leadville for you.
Oh yeah,
let's hear it.
Yeah,
So because your descending skills are so much better than everybody else, and a lot better than they need to be. Maybe if you ever do it again, if that's your thing, you would actually optimize your bike for climbing.
Yeah.
Like full on light, the smoothest tires they have. You know what I'm saying? And then you have the skill to make any bike work on the downhill.
Yeah.
Adequately. So then maybe you can make a little bit more on the climb.
This is what I wanted him to have a gravel bike just for that reason. Because I knew on the descents and because of traffic, you get limited by your speed.
Yeah.
you probably wouldn't have gone any faster on a full enduro bike
No way.
than on your SP100. And I would argue that, as Lee says, on a cross bike on the descents, although it would be a little more jarring for you,
Yeah.
you probably wouldn't go that much slower. But then on the climbs, you could go,
Right.
and on the flats, a lot faster.
Yeah, I think it's probably right. Like I would have felt miserable probably at the end of the day from the jarring, but it probably would have been faster unless that fatigue came to the point where it overrode,
You'll be
my
fine.
ability to do
We'll
it.
find out next year.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Oh man,
Run
I
an
don't.
experiment, and you could set it up soft.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
know,
Go with
yeah,
like some 45s
yeah,
or
go with a
40s.
big-
650s.
Yep, 650 wheels, and then I can run like even like some. I ran 2.0 Maxxis Treadlight tires. They don't make them anymore, so they're kind of hard to find. But those tires were actually super impressive, and running those in like a 27.5 on like the open wide that I have coming, that would have been pretty cool. Something interesting with those tires, really quick, they climb out of the saddle really well. Like you saw them, they're almost like a file tread, right?
Yeah.
You can look them up right now, and producer Tucker will put them into forum.trainerroad.com. Just look for this episode, which is episode 216, and then you can find an image of these ones. But when you get out of the saddle, they grip really well, which I thought that I was going to lose that for sure.
Maybe something you guys can do is measure the leading surface area of a Minion, which is like the classic DH tire with big knobs, but not that many of them,
Yeah.
versus a file.
Yeah,
And there might be a lot more leading edge on the file than you think.
like more contact patch. You're saying?
Not only more contact
Like
patch,
catch,
but
right?
more catch surfaces,
Yeah.
more paddle wheels. Let's say.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was impressive how much it gripped there. When I was braking, it was not very impressive. It was basically
You don't need to brake though, right?
As soon as I hit the brakes, it was like, okay, you just want to go faster. Got it. It just kind of like kept going. But also gripping, they gripped great when I leaned them over. They were, I feel like, a super good Leadville tire. And shout out to a podcast listener who actually suggested those tires some time ago. So that was a good tip. Those tires are great. A couple things. I ran slightly softer suspension. The way I did that was filling my with my MRP fork. I could fill the negative chamber with more air than the positive chamber, and I did that, and it basically made it a little more supple. And I feel like took a lot of the sharpness out. A little softer on the rest of the body. That was a good thing. I got 3 tacks on my front tire. For those racing Leadville, you should expect this every year. I don't know who, but somebody protests the event, and they throw out tacks. Usually it's after the St. Kevin's climb, and that's where it was this year. And I had 3 tacks. I heard them go into my tire. I was like, oh gosh. And I think that I got more than others because the pros had already swept up a good amount of them. But then as I was descending, I was looking at alternate lines. And that's another thing on the descents. Like everybody goes down. I saw somebody comment on my Strava. They're like, "Oh, they smoothed out the trails. That's why you got like faster times." And I actually wish that I had more ruts and I had more bumps and because then it would have given me shapes to work off of, right? And to have traction and to place those sort of things. But they were really smooth, so everybody just sticks to the smooth surface. But while that's happening, I'm going to the outside because if it's a fire road, it's probably dug in a little bit on one side, which means I have a berm, and I love berms, right? So I'm going to that. And since I was doing that, I think that's why I picked up 3. But I used Stan's race sealant because it was a race, and it sealed all 3 of them up instantly as soon as they came out on the descent.
Okay.
Yeah, they ripped out. Once you're going down a road really fast, and then you lean into a turn, it's a lot of torque on it. It just rips them right out. So. Okay, another thing, I started with my PSI 2.5 pounds lower than what I wanted to have. And the reason that I did that was because, number 1, we're going up in elevation. Number 2, the temperature was going to rise over the course of the day. So
That's full on, dude.
yeah.
Did you calculate that number? Or
No,
does that feel?
that's just based off of things that I have heard before. So nerds, it would be awesome. I'm a fellow nerd, so I can say this, but nerds, it would be great if we could jump into the forum. We could calculate how much it would, rise for something like that. That'd be cool.
Because what was the temperature when it started? 38. I saw someone post on Instagram.
Yeah,
and it was 80.
We didn't get up to 80. I think
75.
it was like in the 70s. It's pretty cool.
So fair.
Oh yeah, it was so different from the weather you had. Oh man, it was like we had sprinkles every once in a while. Ooh. It was overcast a lot of the time.
Maybe I'll do Leadville again.
It's genteel.
Absolutely. That's how I would have described it. It was pleasant. It was absolutely pleasant. So that helped. And then basically, so I started at 20 and a half and 21 and a half, 20 and a half up front and then 21 and a half in the rear. And I figured I finished somewhere, I didn't check, but probably somewhere around 23, 24, which when I tested those tires, tires, that was right because they're smaller volume tires. So
next year when you are putting on your new backpack, I will gladly test your tires at each aid station and tell you what you're at.
Okay, cool. Nice.
You get a
Awesome.
shock quiz.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how you guys are deciding I'm doing this again because I don't think I ever am, but that works.
There's a lot of fruit on that tree still.
No, exactly.
No,
like that.
just wait, Lee.
Yeah. But I would have liked larger volume tires for sure. The Aero helmet was great. Vented kit. I used a vented one, and then I had a vest and arm warmers. I actually kept the vest and arm warmers on all the way up Columbine because I was worried that we were going to get rained on. But I just unzipped the vest when I needed to up the climb. And since we're going slow, I'm sure it was catching some wind and causing some drag, but it probably wasn't a big deal. As soon as the speed went up, I was full aero nerd and I zipped that thing up, right? Because I didn't want to be losing time. And then I used USWE packs. I had 3 of them at different aid stations. And the cool thing was I saw so many of those packs. Whereas last year when you were there, I didn't see many at all. Everybody had them. And I think that's because of Eldon Nelson, because he talked a lot about it on the Leadville podcast. So our good friend Fatty, which is cool. Some nutrition stats. I had 4 bottles of mix. There were 3 whole bottles and 2 half bottles that I drank. I had 10 gels. I had 3 hydration packs, 2 of them whole and 2 of them half, meaning that like I was able to drink through 2 whole ones and 2 half ones. And each one of them had 1 pack of Mar10 320 in there. So I took in, this is crazy, I know this is going to break people's brains, but I had 960 grams of carbs over that race. So that's about 120 an hour, which that is above the normal 90, right? And
Do you have gas?
so this is probably a bit TMI, but buckle up. So basically, I felt like energy levels were great throughout the race, like no issues whatsoever. And then once we came down from Columbine, I started coming back. I was like, oh, my stomach hurts really bad. But it didn't feel like gut rot. It's like a different feel. It was just basically like if you weren't riding your bike and you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom, like right now, right? Mm-hmm. And that just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And by the time I got to Pipeline, I was dying. Like it was really bad and I couldn't focus on anything. And then these great people were cooling everybody off with these wet towels, and I saw a totally different purpose for these wet towels. And I was carrying like 3 of them, and one guy's like, why are you carrying so many towels? In my mind, I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I'm just riding. And
You don't want to know.
You don't want to know. And then I snuck off into the woods a few times and took care of business. And then after that, I was totally fine. Energy levels are still high, so I don't feel like it was gut rot. I think it was actually bad food from the night before.
How far into the race was that?
This was like 4 or 5 hours.
See, I think that's the night before.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too was the fact that after that, you would think that if it was like gut rot and like bonking, that I would still be like, oh, I'm in a hole, right? No. After like, sorry.
So this is I don't know how this works. If someone knows, please tell me. But
yeah.
I think what happens is when you get over the amount you can absorb, it just goes through your digestive tract and you get really loose stools and you get gas.
Yeah.
And it does hurt. It's happened to me before.
Yeah.
We can test it like right after this.
So no, thank you. But the interesting thing was I continued my intake at the same rate after and felt great. Afterward. I think and I
test it.
also think it was the food too, because I looked back at the website where we got the food from, and they do use, I didn't think they used dairy, but they did use dairy in there, and dairy causes me issues, and I didn't have any lactate or anything else like that. So I think that's what it was. Because then once I kept going on, it was great. I had awesome energy throughout the rest of the race. So
we'll have to test it still, Nate.
Yeah, you guys go ahead. So always be eating. That's like a big thing that you have to do, and always be drinking, of course. And forget palate fatigue. Honestly, if your palate fatigue is such like a pretentious term anyway, right?
What would that be?
Like when people are like, I just can't handle the same flavor anymore.
Oh my god!
I need something, right?
When you were a caveman.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you? Oh no, I don't want any more buffalo.
Yeah,
man.
You're eating like pounded corn and buffalo for the 17th year in a row.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh
and you're
man,
like, I think I want to go paleo. Oh wait, I almost kind of am.
Yeah,
right.
I don't want palate fatigue. Forget palate fatigue. You can eat whatever you want after the race. Just eat what works, right? And stick to that. And don't take nutrition products that you haven't tested. I saw a bunch of people, like super kind people in the aid station, like offering other people things, right, to eat. And it's one thing if you're like completely depleted, take something on. But otherwise, if that's not in your plan, don't take it. Pacing. That start was just starting at the beginning. That was extremely sketchy. Probably the scariest moments I've ever had on the bicycle in my life. More scary than riding Whistler when it was like completely flooded in a downpour on sketchy slabs and bridges that are covered in moss. By far away. And it's not because the road was sketchy. We were going down a road. It was the riders. And I think it's just because this kind of brand of mountain biker doesn't ride in groups very much. So at least it seems like we were going like 35 miles an hour down this road, 40 miles an hour down this road. And it's very clear by the 100 people in front of us that we were going to hit a right turn in like 200 meters, right? We can all see it because it's downhill. Like we can see the turn. But there are people like taking their hands off the bars and yelling out like right turn and like signaling with their hands. And it's like, yo, we got it. You don't need to take your hand off the bars because when they take their hand off the bars, it's not like a normal rider. They start like going out of control and they stop braking and like did you have a similar experience?
You say that.
It's terrifying.
But still, people back in the green corral,
Miss the turn.
No, they lock up because they don't realize it's coming.
Oh my God.
And they're going and they're like fishtailing.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean, the right
terrifying.
turn yelling, I think, is because they don't want people behind them crashing into them.
It was crazy. And then guys just like I was like spinning around and I'm like looking down. I'm like, I'm doing 300 watts. This is not good. So I just like eased off, right? And there are guys that I'm looking at that I'm just like, see you in 30 seconds when you're blown up, right? And they're just going so hard, and it's such a long day.
It must be exciting though, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's it. That's why.
This is your event of maybe your lifetime.
Yes.
Like your bucket list of one of the things in cycling. And yeah.
Yep. They
300 watts
focus on
doesn't
it.
feel like 300 watts.
You've been training for a year for it probably and taking it really seriously.
Listen to podcasts and all the way up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Like,
exactly. It's like everything for them.
Yeah, that's I've had that too, where it's just so exciting, right?
Yeah.
And then like you blow through the first aid station before they've set it up.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm good, but then you're not good.
Yeah, exactly.
I have an idea, Lee. Of, like, do you ever see it where people descend, where like they descend worse at their most important events, or like the things that matter the most for them because they're in their own head?
Yeah, I can say I me too. You know, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, like we talked last time about optimal arousal and finding that sweet spot. And if you're over it, you're not going to be riding smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I had, not that I ever think about this anymore because it's a complete non-issue in my life. But in 2004, I was on the Masters Worlds team for the USA.
Yeah.
And that was my huge goal for the year, was just to be invited. Like anyone can go, but I had the stars and stripes, right?
That's pretty
so
cool.
I'd already pretty much met my complete cycling goals for downhill. But I got there and I was riding well, dude, and I was there. And there's this one really nutty, you're going like, really fast on a dirt road, hard right, off camber, rooty, rocky, muddy, rainy to an uphill.
Oh geez.
And in practice, dude, I was coming out, I was slowing down almost to a stop. I was squaring up and just edging that section and just carrying speed. And I was like in my 12.
Wow.
Like back then, like a 38-12 and just gone. And I knew I could outpedal everybody. But dude, like I started coming down that hill and I just hear people screaming my name. I had never heard that in my life. I'm like, how do they even know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then Lee likes bikes, all this stuff, and the flash bulbs, and I just didn't slow down enough,
Yeah.
and haunts me.
Yeah.
I punched a tree, and then I'm in my 12
Yeah. There you go.
on flat ground, right?
Yeah. Which means you don't go anywhere, basically.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, like I would guess that would be considered a choke,
Yep.
right?
Oh, and I saw that a ton when we got to aid stations because you kind of like ride with like the same group of people almost the whole race after a while. Like you just see each other in a bit, like every time. And every time we get to aid stations, I'd see them. They're just like hero, right? They're like, I'm jacked up again. Like I can do it. And they go really hard. And then after that, I'd pass them and they'd be just like heavy breathing, right? It happens to all of us.
I feel like you should always have, like, trick your brain. You should have another event.
Yeah.
Like
That's more important.
This is the stepping stone to this other huge event.
100%.
I've done the best on events that are like preps for the big event.
Oh yeah.
Because you
That's
don't care.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
It's
You're
really
like,
interesting.
it's not a big deal. I'm going to pace this perfectly. The outcome doesn't matter. Then you have a great outcome.
Yeah, and like a weekly twilight race before national championships, right?
Yeah.
The one that really doesn't matter. Another thing, we've said it plenty of times, like we just said, go easier than you think you need to on the climbs, and then keep your pace up over the top. That was one thing that I saw like very, very, very few people actually do. And when we were in groups, actually, we kind of formed this tiny group at the very end when you're kind of coming into town and you hit some rollers before you do this really long drag coming into town. And spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't done Leadville, you will like wonder what in the world is wrong with these race organizers, because like the course just feels like, how is it still going? And on this really long dirt road, remember that thing coming in? It feels extremely long, and it's just straight, and you can see it forever. But in those situations, we were riding with a group, and this guy's like, let's form a group. And I'm like, all right, cool. Just so you know, I'm holding my own pace. So, you know, I'll ride my pace if it's the group's pace. And we go over, and I was like doing a pull. Then a guy came around me, and he goes up this hill, and he had to have been going like 400 watts, right? And then like he like goes back to fall back, and he looks worked. And I was like, hey man, I'll work with you as long as you don't do that ever again. Like don't pull that hard. It's not going to help anybody.
I love how you have healthy boundaries out there.
You have to.
My girls are in like a Waldorfy school. They're learning that.
Yeah. You have to, right? You have to just place those lines for sure. The other thing, walking is more tiring than riding, I swear. Unless you have really bad gearing, right? That's like puts you way over the limit. But a lot of people I saw just like instantly give up and walk. And but try to stay on the bike.
The shopping cart is so hard, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Pushing your bike up this steep, loose thing. You're like, man, this sucks.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, it does.
It's terrible.
I must be specially adapted or something.
It's like, you've done it more.
I like to say that I'm pretty good. Humbly, I'll say I'm pretty good at pushing a bike.
The up Columbine, we had to walk when I was there. There's so many people.
Yep.
But I actually tweaked my back, and my triceps got tired from pushing the bike so much.
Because if
I
you're
never
pushing
do
up
it.
Columbine, that's a long time you're pushing, because it's, really steep for a long time. And then the other point is on the descents. We talked about looking outside the main line, like coming down Pipeline. You have, on almost every situation, you have berms to the side of the trail. Like, look and use those. We unfortunately didn't have ruts this time, because the ruts would have been awesome too, because I guarantee you people wouldn't have been descending in the ruts. So it's like, okay, I've got a clear line, and it's perfect for me, and I can just stick to that.
One of the things that happens when we're under stress is our eyes just follow that main line. Like we get this really hard focused vision, right? And you can't see. So you need to have some bandwidth in the first place.
Yep.
In order to even conceive of it.
Yes.
You can feel it when you're really pinned on a downhill run, like when you cross that line.
Yep.
Like where it becomes, it takes a lot more like mental effort to pick other lines, right?
We'll talk about this in a second, but we did a drill with you where we didn't pedal at all. Mm-hmm. And that was like, this trail's a lot bigger now.
It's amazing,
yeah,
right?
like,
Yeah.
that was crazy. Let's make sure we cover that when we get to it.
And so specifically on Pipeline, that's a long trail with big line of sight. And something that we covered with you last time, Lee, was like, braking and making sure that when you brake, it's not just you squeezing levers, right? But when you brake, it's placing your weight down and into the bike when you brake at the same time. So then you have more traction, you have more stopping power.
Can you describe that? Mm-hmm. How do you brake on a mountain bike?
So, well, first of all, like if you have static weight, then there's a hard line on your traction, the amount of traction you have, function of load and friction on the tires and the surface, right?
Meaning you can't change or shift that weight.
You can't surpass it. So a lot of people will tell me, I don't trust my tires. And I'll tell them, don't. You shouldn't trust your tires. Yeah. You should trust you.
Yeah, good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And so everything we do is a wave, sine wave of love, right? Mm-hmm. So you'd want to corner and brake in the heavy phase of your personal love wave.
Yeah. I like that. That's good.
And so there's a pendulum that hangs from your belly button, right? And when you hit the brakes, as you might expect, it swings forward. Hence, that's why you guys get your hands beaten up, back tires skid, and sometimes your eyes will kind of rattle out of your head, and you got to go find them. But then you don't have your eyes; it's hard, it's awkward,
it's tricky,
super awkward. A good reason to ride in a group, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So when we brake, we wanna come light. First of all, like Jonathan says, we want to place our braking. Mm-hmm. Decide where you're going to brake ahead of time, so it's an act of will, not an act of reaction, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, you'll kind of, just like you're on a little trampoline, you'll come light, and then in a very smooth way, as you come heavy, like as that wave like starts to build, you're gonna ease into your brakes at the same pace as your heaviness, and at the same time you're gonna rotate back around the bottom bracket. That means everything: cranks, pedals, feet. Your entire torso will just change angle. And simple math would be if you're decelerating at a G, which heck yeah, we can do. The net angle is 45 degrees. So get out on your bike and like put your finger 45 degrees back from the bottom bracket. That's where your center of mass should be.
Which means you're way back.
So your butt's way back, and then so you simultaneously get heavy, apply a brake, correct your position so your hands stay weightless, and then as you release that brake pressure and weight, then you come back to center. And then that's how you should brake.
Yeah.
But that's not how people brake.
Yeah, exactly. And pipeline's really long, and I would see people just sitting there dragging the whole way down.
Right.
Super tense, right? Because they're just waiting for their tires to give out, right? Because they're just kind of braking and they're static and they're not moving. And that trail has undulations. That road has undulations, right? So I was like, oh, sweet. I can just coast, and then if I need to slow down, when I come into that thing, I'm just going to get nice and heavy into that thing.
You can use that.
Nice and low. I'm going to let myself sink down and back, and then I'll boom, pop some braking in, and then I'll be able to control my speed instead of just dragging my brakes. And it makes everything better because everything in life is better with speed. And
Did you hit your brakes though?
Yeah, had to. Okay. And the reason that I had to is just because there were so many people everywhere. But otherwise, I think that you could just go straight wide open down that thing, and then you would just place your braking at the end.
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to guess that if you keep your eyes out, if you have a soft vision, so you don't look at anything but you see everything, like that kind of scene, and you're pumping the big shapes, I'll bet you could go as fast as you want.
You absolutely can. And it could be rougher, and you could do the same thing because it's straight and you can just see the whole time. And the other thing is, once again, it has berms. So I was able to also maintain the speed and then manage that because I have berms to be able to hold myself rather than trying to ride on an off camber little, turn, something like that.
And the best way to ride off camber is to not ride off camber.
Yeah, exactly right.
You turn it into not that, right?
When you don't like the turn, make your own turn, right?
Fair enough. That's Anthony Robbins, actually.
It totally is, yeah. So some takeaways on the event. Corral position matters a ton. Like Brandon, his race was entirely different in the beginning because he had to walk through things that I didn't have to walk through, and it was all because of the corral position.
Try the back of green.
Oh,
that's what I did.
Brutal, yeah. And so impressive, by the way. I was there supporting you, but just like another, if you would, a round of applause. If we were like a radio show, Tucker would hit the clap thing right now. You did an incredible time last year. With even considering, if you take away the fact that you melted out there, you still put in an incredible time, especially for where you were. So I'm just super impressed. But that said, you can make it up, and I wouldn't say that you should make it up, and we probably shouldn't. But Chad Hall, he's you know who Chad Hall is, pro road racer.
Pro road racer.
Holy cow, is he fast! And so he was in his mind. He's like, "Yeah, man, the race starts at 7 a.m. I'm sure of it." And it did not start at 7 a.m. It started at 6:30. So he showed up at 6:45, and he was like, "Where is everybody? This is like Freaky Friday or something, right?" Like it's like, oh no. So he showed up late, and he was like, "I better start riding." So he passed me going up the backside, I guess going up Sugarloaf, the backside of Pipeline, and he ripped by me, and I was like, "What are you doing back here?" Because we were actually feeding him. Our same crew was feeding him. And he was like, "I don't want to talk about it." And he would pass me at an insane amount of speed, going uphill, just blew my mind. And I was like, well, whatever happened, Chad's going to blow up in 30 seconds because he cannot sustain that speed. He finished, I think, 10th. He got all the way back up. So amazing. I cannot believe it. So, Chad, even though you probably hate yourself for showing up late, right? I'm so impressed.
I literally have dreams about this with triathlons.
Yeah.
That you show up, or when I come out of the swim and your tires aren't pumped up and your helmet's not there.
Terrible. It'd be the worst,
this
right?
is anxiety.
Yeah.
It happened.
It happened.
That's the variation on it's the last day of school and you haven't attended any classes.
Yeah.
Right? You're about to take, that's a variation on that theme.
Exactly. So also this race, it is absolutely, I've reviewed this many times in my head and tried to remove the emotion that I had in the moment of it, and it is without a doubt, in my opinion, the most dangerous race I've ever done in my life. And the reason for that is because you have two-way traffic going on Columbine and on different portions of the course. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, many close calls.
I told you, you got to make sure you have to really be on the right, especially because you're so far up front that when you get later on, it's hard to say, but it's such it's not very wide, maybe as wide as this table.
It's like a Jeep trail. So it's basically got two tracks.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of those tracks isn't very viable for climbing. Mm-hmm. So people swerve over.
Or you try to pass somebody.
And they're trying to pass, and they're at 12,000 feet, and they're nearly 50 miles into a race, and they probably went way too hard like everybody else did, and they're probably not eating and drinking enough. So they're loopy. They don't make sense.
At least there's people going 40 miles an hour down the other side, right?
But that's the thing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. From a physics standpoint, there's something about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's pretty much, it's so loose. Like if someone were to come out, even pushing their bike and didn't look forward, the person coming down, it's so loose, can't stop.
You can't stop. And just terrifying, like terrifying experiences. So I went into the sagebrush multiple times and I was like, I hope there's not a big boulder here because I'm either going to hit somebody.
Oh, you had to get out of the line.
Oh, yeah. Go off the trail entirely. And I'm going through sagebrush that's as high as my knees. You know what I mean?
This is so crazy to hear because we're all told that it's a non-technical race and it's no big deal. And
Which
I just got to
technical,
ride my road bike a lot.
Yeah.
But to hear you, a very accomplished rider, tell us that you said this is the most dangerous race you've done. You said that.
By far and away.
So I think people should heed that.
Yeah.
It's the people.
Yes. It's the people on that course that make it dangerous, right? It's not the course itself.
Well, it's a mix, right?
Yep, it's a mix.
Yeah. If you get the 12,000, 14,000 feet and the course is not very wide and it's loose and people want to get these times.
So here's the other thing. Leadville, you can avoid this. Like, I don't know why you don't do this, event organizers. Did you notice this? When you're climbing up Columbine, you get to this point where it gets really steep. And
I noticed that part.
you turn right, and it gets really steep. And if you look to the left, there's another fire road that's really not that steep. It's slightly longer, and it takes you to the same exact spot.
Oh, dude.
And you can see it. And it just takes you to the same spot. And in my mind, I'm like, why are we not separating here? It would be so much safer for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. So the descenders could go in the long way down, maybe.
Exactly right. Or whatever you want to do, just make us go down different ways, and it's totally possible to do it.
I wonder if they just need to have it open for emergency vehicle access or something
maybe
like that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But definitely dangerous. That's
And two, it's private land up there, so it's hard to. I think they have to do deals about what they can take and what they can't take.
Well, death is also bad, so hopefully that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was super scary. Like we said, Columbine isn't that bad. Pipeline is much harder, in my opinion. Pipeline's the hardest climb I've done. Brandon also agreed the hardest climb he's done. A guy, Scott Tatesel from the company Quarry, the kits that we like, he's done it, I think, 9 times under 7 hours, maybe. He's so fast, like really fast. And he also, I said this, talking to him after the race, he's like, yeah, every time Pipeline is insane, like mind-blowingly hard. It's the hardest climb he's done. So save yourself for that. Aid stations have to have a clear plan and backups. In our case, Chad tapped the Google Maps pin instead of tapping the link that I have for Google Maps directions. And as a result, the pin took him onto the course and it forced him to the Twin Lakes aid station instead of the Twin Lakes alternate that we went to.
Uh-oh.
So as a result, because otherwise, if you just follow Google Maps, it takes you on course and you're forced to go there. But otherwise, you have to go way down the road. So we didn't tap, or Chad tapped the pin instead of tapping the route. And as a result, he ended up showing up at a different aid station. I was very confused. Didn't end up affecting the race. We stayed calm. That's another thing in aid stations, stay calm. According to Amaret and Chad, they saw many things, grown men crying, families giving a dad a bottle, something like that, and the dad getting angry and throwing the bottle down and saying he doesn't want that bottle.
That's a global thing. Everybody should relax at aid stations, period.
Yes.
The end.
Yes.
10 seconds is never going to change your entire race.
Right.
Never, ever, ever,
And
ever.
in that short little time, you can recover and relax and drop down that level of arousal for a bit.
I'm going to take it one step further.
It's huge.
Thank the people.
Yes.
Either the volunteers
Always say thank you.
or the people that have come in triathlon. This is huge. At least with the part of the race that I'm at, everyone's thanking every volunteer.
Yes. Yes.
Some people are
For sure.
too type A. And
Yes.
they get too far into their own head.
This is a great one. As seen in aid stations. Okay, that should be like a thing. But a guy pulls up. One person is there to pinch the front tire with his legs so he can hold the rider up. The other one goes to the saddle. He has Amp Human on his hands, and he's rubbing it. No joke, this happened. Rubbing it on the rider's legs, refreshing it, right?
Nice.
So one guy's
Pit
rubbing
stop.
it on his legs, yes. Another guy is pouring ketones into his mouth. And then other people have goos, like gels, and they're putting them in his mouth and squeezing them into his mouth.
What?
All the while the rider's holding onto the handlebars. And I'm just whoa, I get what you're trying to do, like NASCAR, right? Like get it all done
Formula
really
One.
quick. Yeah, good point. But relax, take your hands off the bars. It's gonna help you out.
I would have put my hands anywhere else.
Right? You want to get them off the bars, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So anyways, that the other thing, I feel like event organizers, I plead with you, change your aid station strategy and put an aid station at Turquoise Lake after you climb up Pipeline and go down Sugarloaf. I know that you have a lot of neutral stuff with like water, but people should be able to have their feeds after that. And it's not safe, in my opinion, because the hardest part of that course is from Pipeline back, because there's a lot of climbing, like a ton of climbing.
Especially if it's like in the high 90s.
And that's when it's actually hot, right? Throughout the day. In our case, it wasn't very hot, but that's when it gets hot. That's when you're most tired. That's when you have everything. And then you have like the longest and hardest stretch. You have no aid stations. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's where you should have an aid station. And I feel like people would have a much more enjoyable experience as well, because they finish Leadville completely blown because you haven't put an aid station there. And then they think, oh, that was a terrible experience. I don't want to do that. If anything, don't give them aid stations in the beginning. Like, give them like every single thing they could possibly want toward the end of a race when a person needs it, and they will come back. I promise you.
Yes.
That's the best way to do it.
Makes a lot of sense.
So it would be a lot more helpful for people. And then also to riders, always take the cold towels. There were a ton of cold towels out there. EF education first.
Not when I did it.
With the hot time, they didn't have them.
No, there's
That's
no one who had a
terrible.
cold towel.
That's terrible. So they had a bunch of them this time. And
Maybe there's one, but it wasn't cold.
EF education first. They had, I don't know if it was like the people on the exchange student programs that they do, whatever else. They had a gigantic amount of people, and they were all handing out like wet bandanas that were coming out of coolers all the time. Like,
That's awesome.
take those things. I saw a lot of riders skipping them. Even if you don't feel hot, take it, because your body is still working really hard to off-put a lot of heat. So that's Leadville. A lot of people were saying like passing me, or I was passing them, and they were like, man, I can't wait to hear this podcast, all the crazy things that happened. Nothing crazy happened throughout the whole day. But
Except that it was the scariest race of your life.
yes, that was terrifying.
And Brandon's time?
Brandon's time was 8:40, I think. Yeah,
No, 8:30.
8:30 something.
Somewhere in
yeah.
there. Yeah.
somewhere
He had
around
a bad day. Mm-hmm. I think he wants to go back.
Yes, he does. Yeah,
does.
he does.
Okay.
I'll support, but I'm not doing it.
I'll support also. And
Yeah.
you
Well,
can do it, Nate.
Yep.
Again.
And also, one quick thing on the aid station thing around Turquoise Lake, I saw people still back there because they know the logic of the thing, and they're looking at logic and safety of the riders. There were still plenty of families back there giving aid. And they say
illegal
that's,
aid or
they say
whatever.
that's illegal. They were right by race organizers that were there, and they didn't care. So I think that maybe if we just like start like an underground, like a rising, like an undercurrent, and
There
just
should
people
be a-
show up there, maybe we can
Trainer
make
Road
it
made this
official.
uprising happen.
Yeah. And for the
It'd be
safety
an
of riders.
Hashtag TrainerRoad punk rock.
Yeah, super punk rock that is. Yeah.
So how'd you did an 8:14. How'd you feel afterwards?
Great. Like the knots, Nate's setting up for something. I felt fine. I did not feel tired, excessively tired. I felt like I had ridden 100 miles, but I did not feel excessively tired.
Okay, so
How did you feel, Nate?
we're all very proud of you. But I think I'm speaking for everyone here that we're all very annoyed at you for I didn't go that hard and got an 8:14. I saw
Yeah.
your Strava title, and I immediately thought he has to do it again because, well, we talked about your goals. Your goals changed.
Yeah.
Because your goal was to do it as fast as possible.
To get it over with as soon as possible.
As fast. So what I thought was he's going to do a capacitive effort.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Pace it well, smart, and I had you at 7:46.
Yeah.
But you roll in and you go, that was easy, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to train tomorrow. And everyone else, I was out. I was out for a month.
Oh yeah, you were. I was genuinely worried for your safety at the finish last year.
Yeah, so I don't know if we even count this as doing it rather than just a practice ride. What's the, you see one?
He pre-wrote it.
Yeah, he pre-wrote it. So now he knows.
Now we could do it for real.
Exactly.
And he pre-wrote it on his big slow bike.
Yeah.
Right. And next time he's going to come out on a proper fast bike.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
On a gravel bike?
On a gravel bike.
No,
right?
I
That
think I'm
open,
done.
dude.
I think I'm done with it. I don't know. I'll
I don't
happily
know.
support.
I heard it.
I mean, forgive me. I thought about this. I was like, I might do it if my son said, "Hey, Dad, I want to do Leadville," but I'd actually tell my son there's better things to do. So
I feel so bad. They're not going to let you back in.
they probably won't. It's and the thing is, it's just not it's not what excites me about mountain biking, right? And that's why I don't really want to go back and do it. And so my objectives did change, right? That's the famous Chad line.
Yeah.
I didn't quit. I changed my objectives, is what he said. But for me, I got into it And I was thinking in the beginning, I was like, and I was probably honestly pretty overwhelmed by how frightening the beginning was with a group. And I was kind of like, it kind of like made me reset. And yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll say something.
Yeah, and I think I got into the mode where I looked at this and I started thinking of you and last year and how I was genuinely worried that you were gonna like black out. Like you were deep and you were in a very bad place, right?
That's what I wanted you to be.
I know you wanted that, but I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to die. Like I kind of had like life flashing before my eyes in that group.
You're obviously not committed to this race.
Yes, that's probably about right. And I was like,
he's just a hobbyist.
So I was like, you know what? Maybe we can make this an in quotes enjoyable experience. Like not like afterward I'm like I'm shelled. I can't do anything for weeks, right? And that part mission accomplished. So I don't regret it. I don't regret the way I paced it.
If you take out, like, you beat me by so much on the descents, your time was like only like 10 minutes faster than mine, but at not many more, but half a watt or probably half a watt a kilo higher than me.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just to show how you were going a lot slower.
Yep.
Okay, you were in the Silver Corral descending. I would say that probably in general, further back you go, the skills are maybe not as experienced riders.
I would agree with that assumption. It's probably not fair, but that's an
No, but
assumption
there's a
we can
mix,
make.
right?
Yeah.
But probably in general, if
Yep.
you're 2.5 watts per kilo, you're probably not an experienced handler as someone at 4.5 or
Just
5.
because it takes more time on the bike to get there. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
If anything else.
So it does get pretty scary.
Oh, yeah.
I was in the back of green and purple, and and there's more people too.
Oh yeah.
The road was really, and then the other thing is it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
So you're descending 38, and you don't want
Everyone's shivering.
You don't have a huge jacket on because it's about to get really hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just adds a whole another layer of complexity to it.
Yeah.
I wish they wouldn't start it in town. If they would start it at the bottom of the descent.
Yeah. Or even take like a route through town that isn't like maybe make a switch back almost through town because you totally can. So it's not just straight down a crazy hill.
Yeah,
it's just not safe.
Yeah.
You know, pretty crazy, man. That was some nerve-wracking stuff. But yes, I don't think in fact, I'm very confident in saying one and done.
What about you, Pete?
I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But you got to do it for Cape Epic.
No, I'll gladly do Cape Epic, but Leadville
Yeah.
I can't do it.
It doesn't tickle the nerve,
No.
right? Yeah, it doesn't get you going.
I feel like it either gets you or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people. This is the same with when we do our Ironman.
Yeah.
Some people they get it and they're like, I love this.
I would be tickled by doing an Ironman, but not by doing Leadville, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, and I understand it because
Yeah.
I felt like I was the same way. Then I was like, I'm going to withhold judgment. And honestly, the race was very much what I expected.
Did you really withhold judgment?
No, not at all. I didn't. I just held it quietly within, sometimes not quietly. And then I went in, and I'm glad I did it for sure.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't done it, I would be just as whole of a man, so to speak. Like I don't feel like it filled any void or anything like that. So, but Pete and I will be there to support you next year, Nate.
And Brandon again.
And now that I've supported and I've raced,
I can't do it.
You can't do it?
No.
Why?
I got Cape Epic.
Yeah, it's like
I go hard at these events.
240 days after Leadville.
Confused.
No, it's less than that because it's the next spring.
Yeah, so it's August
March, yeah.
to March.
So you're not doing it?
No, why would I do it?
Oh, I mean, I thought that you would get
because
excited
it's
and want to do it.
Enjoyable,
Yes.
No, it's so.
or it fills a void. I mean, that's a big deal.
Right? It does
That's like the biggest deal.
That's
really.
why, I think that's why. Honestly, I mean, like everything fills a void for some reason. Like we don't compete for ribbons, and like honestly, you know what I mean? So
I would like to do it some other time if my fitness and weight are dramatically improved. But it does take a lot out of me.
yeah,
And I've got bigger goals. Like next year, stepping back, I got third in a 1-2-3 35 plus race Sunday,
yeah.
and I got some points in a 35. I got fourth in a 35 plus 1-2-3 race on Saturday. And I'm 2 points away from Cat 2.
Yeah.
So I want to get Cat 2, and then I want to get Cat 1 next year. So
Yeah.
I want to be doing stage races.
got it.
And that's a much different.
Much and more precise preparation, probably.
Exactly. I got to be riding my TT bike a lot. I got to work on my anaerobic power.
The TT bike doesn't build for Cape Epic, but the stage race format absolutely does. And there's so many things you learn. Like stage races, it's a different skill in itself.
Totally.
I want to be able to get a high FTP during that time. And then after maybe Hawaii, start to work then on with a high FTP. Now let's add lots and lots of volume and lots of sweet spot, which Cape Epic is going to be.
Yeah. Yep. And he mentions Hawaii because we go there for Kona, and we also treat it like a training camp too.
Yep,
we
exactly.
train
It's kind of like the kickoff of Cape Epic training, and it's after some travel.
So I think I want to be there next year, even if you don't race then. Pete, I don't know if you want to come because I think
they're not going to let you in the town.
They might not. It's a good point. But I would like to just support users there. It'd be cool to have like neutral support in the sense that like, for all you TrainerRoad listeners or users listening.
A high five tunnel.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Like, but, have like good nutrition products that are there, like the ones that it's like 2-to-1 glucose fructose ratio, just things that make sense that we know works, that that
rub
sort of
lotion
stuff.
on the legs.
Yeah, we'll do the full NASCAR pit stop.
Jonathan will have the gels pre-ready to squeeze into your mouth.
Yeah, I think that could be fun though.
They can make a little gel roller device.
Oh yeah.
You could do like a toothpaste roller type thing.
Yeah,
but a power one. So you'd push with your thumb, and it would just be like.
Yeah, it just goes right in.
Yeah.
Will you get on that, Lee?
I want a gel bong.
We know how to make things. So.
Gel bong. That would be hilarious. Yeah, that could work.
Instead of a beer bong, just load up with gels.
Dude, that's funny. Like a half gallon of gel all at once. And everybody's cheering. Go,
that'd be hilarious, right? Chug. So anyways, thank you so much to everybody that was there. It was so cool to talk with you guys, trade polls, do all that stuff. It was awesome. Congrats to everybody that did it. Leadville is such a challenge. Like even completing that course is hard. Like it is a really hard course, physically, psychologically, extremely hard. That is just really hard. So everybody that finished it, I don't care what time you finished it in, you should feel like, there were people like, oh, that's not, sub 9, that's not sub 10 or we're sub 8,
it's
whatever.
100 miles on a mountain bike.
And it's really hard.
It
is so hard.
Yeah.
So like everybody that does that, you should feel truly accomplished for doing that for sure. And kudos. It was awesome. Let's get into some skills. Let's do that.
Sounds good.
So we talked yesterday. We went through the skills clinic. We worked on a bunch of different things. We got on the rip row, which I've used that rip row regularly throughout ever since we got ours, which was like a little over a year and a half ago, I think now. And I use it as kind of like a refinement of technique, that sort of a thing. It was honestly really helpful when I hurt my knee and I was going through rehab because one of the big issues that we highlighted in rehab was hip impingement and like a lack of mobility in my hips, right? And this really kind of gave me a good way to work on hip mobility in a dynamic way that wasn't so like, because there were stretches that I was doing that were really painful that I was working on and things to try to kind of break up impingements actually in the hip. And then there was, this dynamic movement that I could do, which was awesome. So it's like a really good technique training tool, also a really good strength training tool, the whole thing. And then we took it out to the course and we worked on it on our bikes and we worked on a bunch of stuff. But Nate, one thing that you really wanted to work on was turns, like flat turns.
Flat corners, yeah.
And you're better at them now.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. What happened?
Well, Lee, why don't you explain how... There's two parts I want when you talk about. One, you have a new a way to describe the relationship between rowing and anti-rowing and what you do with your feet, and then how that then goes into flat turns.
Okay.
He says it better than I do.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, of course. So then all of us, right? Yeah.
When you ride, imagine the trail as a wave. If you're on a pump track or a BMX track or a new school flow trail, that's pretty obvious. If you're on a technical trail, you can do this sometimes. You can just get off your bike and put your eyes like a foot off the ground and look down the trail. You'll see undulations. Even on a, quote, flat fire road, there's always something going on, right? So we'll use the example of two rollers, like say they're 15 feet apart, let's say. 14 inches tall, 15 feet apart. When I think of riding like in a simple way of either the act of rowing or anti-rowing. So when you're looking at these rollers, don't think, am I going up or down, as much as think, am I going through a trough or am I going over a crest? At the basic level. And so, by the way, like a crest would be like the rock you're riding over or the log, or if you jump all your time in the air is the crest of a wave, ideally. When you go through a trough, your feet, this is the simple version. I'll give you the next version in a sec. Your feet are going down into the hole and your bike is rotating backwards, so your hands are coming towards you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes
and
sense.
this is something people aren't in touch with generally, but what you'll do in that moment is you'll row. And a row sounds like what you think a row is. You can push with your feet and pull with your hands. Or more precisely, brace your core, push with your hips, and pull with your lats. That would be ideal. And that does two really rad things. One thing is it manages the angle of the bike so you don't get kicked back. How many of you guys have ever been thrown forward like off a water bar?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
That was one of the big things I noticed. Like that used to be something that happened to me all the time.
You'd hit something and you get bucked.
Kicked forward, like over the front of my bike.
We're like on a jump, right, Nate?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the scariest thing when you go off a jump and you get
Oh, yeah.
kicked forward and you land on your front wheel and you feel like you're gonna die.
And that
Yes, 100%.
that generally happens because you haven't pulled the bars toward you. Like when you go, let's say, from a negative 10-degree downslope to a plus 45-degree lip, which would be like a good neutral fun lip, your bars swung back at you. Your bike changed angle 55 degrees.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So if you're on a rip row and you're a normal person, that's a little bit more range than you possess. Right. And by the way, when you're in the air, if the takeoff is plus 45 and the landing is negative 30, 75 degrees.
It's a lot of
it's a lot.
rotation.
That's a lot. And if you have a rip bro, you can see. I mean, max range on that would be around 80. No, it's designed to be 90.
Yeah.
So it's really essential that we learn to row through these troughs. And then as you go over the top of the bump, it's an anti-row, which is the opposite. Your feet will come towards you and your hands will go away from you. And if you can add that to your riding in a linear way, that's next level for almost everybody.
Can I add on to that or like wrap some context around it really
Sure.
quick? So you mentioned like the anti-row thing, where that's where your hands extend in front of you. And you mentioned this yesterday and it was interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That's when the cool pictures are taken, right?
Yes.
Like when you look at a really fast downhill rider, maybe like Tucker can maybe we can work on this after, or you can work on it now, Tucker, if you want, but find some pictures of a guy kind of like going off of like a rock drop. In fact, there's one, if you go to the Rip Row's website, there is a clear row and anti-row. I'm looking at it right now with Curtis Keene.
Yeah.
And he's anti-rowing off of a drop.
Right.
And you'll see that. And it looks super cool.
Right.
So that's like, if you're trying to picture row and anti-row, that's a great job. That's a great way to look at it there. Now, when you're talking about seeing the trail as like an ocean, like a series of waves, and they just continue, what that looks like in the way that a rider rides is that they're linking all of this together, right? So if you watch, it's great to watch the Enduro World Series recaps. I know Pete and I watch them all the time because we're Enduro nerds. Like
Enduro bro.
Yeah,
you guys are bros. Yeah.
Aspiring Enduro.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
we're Enduro nerds. We're not bros yet. So, but when you watch that, you watch a guy like Sam Hill, or you watch, was Isabeau Courdurier, whichever rider, the top riders. You watch her when they're coming into a turn, they don't just let the turn come to them and then they just follow that angle. You'll look at them, and if it's a left turn, they're probably hooking kind of before that turn. They're kind of hooking to the right, and they're making a turn to the right, and they're loading their suspension, and then it unloads with this row and anti-row motion, so then they can land with their weight. They row and anti-row through that left turn after that.
Yeah,
right?
like if you're a skier, that feeling of snapping between corner turns that's
best feeling in the world.
Yeah, and that has loading, unloading, side to side loading, and polyaxial rotation, which are all huge flow triggers. So back to the row anti-row, right? Like that gets you in. It starts to get you in phase with the trail. So instead of getting beaten up, or having your head jostle, and as soon as the gyroscopes start getting jostled, you start to feel sketchy, right? So
Yes, so true.
So that's basic row anti-row. At the next, and that's what we talked about when I was here last. The new edition was, and everybody envision this. It's actually on my Facebook if you want to.
Yeah, we'll put it in the
up.
forum. Tucker, you can look up this picture because I think the picture really does it justice.
I think so. And so basically your hands control the attitude of the bike. So as we talked about, your hands should come back towards you when you're going through a hole and away from you when you're going over a crest.
Yep.
So that's the timing of your hands is hole or crest, or trough or crest. At the same time, your feet are tracking the up and down. And if you ski bumps or moguls, it's the same deal. So imagine, so you have like a timeline. The timing of your hands and your feet are almost exactly out of phase with each other, which is, it's like so trippy. And a lot of you people have felt this that day. Sometimes when you're just too tired to deal and you're going over rollers, you can feel this. And what happens when you overlap those two like dynamics is the handlebar has an elliptical path. And so if you watch like a Sam Hill or a Jonathan Lee, you know, that level, right?
I was just in the same sentence as Sam Hill.
Right? That's pretty good.
There's no reason. I mean, if you, sorry, with this
Like,
performance,
sorry to
with,
Sam, right? Yeah.
No, with this performance at Leadville, it makes me wonder how hard you're trying in your endurance, in your enduro racing.
Thanks for bringing me back down.
There you go. But there's this, you can see there's an elliptical path. And if you're watching good chest cam footage, you'll see the bars being pushed away in a circle.
Yeah, you mentioned that too, Nate. It's funny, like whenever you watch that chest cam footage, you can see it. It's not just the bars moving in a linear path.
No, it's going
They
away
roll,
on this
they
arc.
roll into frame and out of frame and into frame and out of frame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it'll kind of pass like by your chest in a way. So that's what's going on at the highest level that I know of today. Maybe in 2 years we'll know better, right? Yeah. So we plug that into bumps. And then here, this gets really interesting. And this is the only drill we did yesterday on the bike. And it totally worked on the whole mountain. Like, we ride waves. A corner is a wave that's sideways. That's the deal. That's the deal. There's the old school, like lean your bike, load the outside pedal, turn your hips into the turn. That works. And everybody should be good at that, like edging a turn. Everybody should know that. At the higher level, you're going to be pumping corners as if they're sideways holes. And so like the drill I did with you guys yesterday, and Nate and I did the heck out of this drill, is I call it scalloping. And so let's say there's a 180-degree turn, you'll break it into pieces. 360s, 630s. The sketchier the surface is, the more pieces you'll bite off. And so imagine this left turn, you're going to cup it. And there's like the left phase, that's effectively the trough, and you're going to row through that. And what that's going to do is it's going to lever the bike through the turn the way you'd lever a ski through a turn. And then you're going to make like a very slight like correction to the right, and that would be the anti-row, which is the push phase, and you get another row. And so this is what's going on at the highest level. And when you do this, you can propel yourself by turning, which is great.
It's amazing.
And
Feels
also,
so cool.
And also you can generate traction. So we talked about like tire, right? Like with this style, the only limit to your traction is how good your powdering is and how much power you put in. And I've seen all kinds of stuff. We just did a cyclocross camp last week in Boulder doing this, and we're talking about cyclocross tires on a gravelly dirt road, exiting the corner at 20 miles an hour, a 90-degree turn, right? And people not drifting. And if you look at the tracks, it's so total CSI, right? You'll see this like left right wave where the left phase is like a half-inch deep. And then the right
Like
phase
cut
is
into
weightless and cut into the ground.
Yep.
And you're kind of actually making a berm, right? So I hope that makes some sense and you guys can visualize that.
Yeah, so in my mind, like, you have the arc of a turn, and if you're scalloping through that turn, what you're going to see is a slight left-right wiggle instead of just a smooth arc through that turn.
Exactly. And
Yeah, go ahead.
that the reason like I consider that to be a master drill and the only one we did yesterday is because it includes cornering at a high level. It includes pumping at a high level. If you snap the turns hard enough, it includes hopping. And that basic, when you're shredding, when you're in that mode and you're making waves, that basic like cup and like change direction, like cup a turn, load, unload, and transition. It's like skiing. Like that is I think one of the essences of shred. And once you have it, you can plug it into rocks and corners on trail, etc.
Yeah. So this is, I'm going to describe it how I've thought of it.
Which, by the way, is really, sorry, but this is a really important thing because, the way Lee describes it, the way I describe it, the way Nate describes it, it may all be different, but I've found that like and I'm sure you found this, Lee, the same principle just feels different or resonates differently or is explained differently by so many people. Like
You hear it multiple times.
yeah, exactly.
And it's going to work one of either you're like Nate or John or Lee.
Yep.
That's true. And one thing that is cool about having coached like 7,000 people is like you can see how people react to different
Yeah.
ways of explaining things.
Yeah. So Nate.
Okay, so on the road, you go in a crit or anything. You take a turn on the road. You kind of get you get your outside foot down there. There's a point where the turn starts, and you keep the same pressure through the whole turn. I mean, maybe it's a little bit different through the turn, but it's very smooth. And if you were to do what Lise just said, break it up into multiple points, everyone will yell at you.
Because it'll look like triple apexing or something.
Yeah,
like that,
exactly.
right?
And it will sketch people out. People might crash. We have videos of Keegan Swenson in the flat tire crit racing,
Yeah.
and you see pros doing this on the road.
Yep.
And it looks super sketchy on the road.
Because really what you're trying to do, you're dealing with a variable surface. And that's when this sort of thing is really important, right?
It's more essential. Like I think that here's a thought, right?
Yeah.
We want to create the kind of the kind of habits that are simple and repeatable and always available when we really need them, right? So I would say, and I understand what you're saying about being in a crit, you can't be messing the crew up, right? But I would say that you should pump every corner you make. And I'll bet you a nickel that Peter Sagan is pumping his corners.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can go ahead, Nate.
Let me finish my whole thing because. So as you come through a corner road bike too, there's more pressure at one point than another point. But as we're alluding to, on a flat fire road or off camber, you can't come into this and increase the pressure slightly as it comes through, and that slight increase over time without the weight makes it so you slide out, and then it's really scary. But what Lee was showing me is during that, because you have limited traction, what we kind of talked before, by breaking up into points and weighting down, you raise your traction a whole bunch at little small parts, and you get your turning done only with maximum pressure. Where you can't do that on a flat, you can do this on a berm, but on a flat, fast fire road, you can't have maximum pressure for a long 90-degree turn. So by breaking up into little teeny points with maximum pressure, then you can get maximum tire traction and way more traction over the complete turn than if you were to do like a road bike, where you don't usually run out of.
You're not worried about the edge.
Yeah,
of traction.
unless you really mess up or something like that. So by doing that and breaking it up and then scalloping through, you can get way more traction and more aggressive small turns, which feels weird, but it worked really well.
You're getting a lot of turn in a short period of time because you're maximizing that
pressure.
section of traction.
Yep.
Right. So you're actually
Does that make sense, Lee?
Yeah, and it's cool to hear you see it. Say like you can have inert weight forever. You can have a little bit of weight for a long time, and you can only have a lot of weight for a short time, right? And we want to triple, quintuple your body weight. Like it's not that unusual to bottom out a suspension bike by cornering.
Yep. Yeah, which is, I think, a shock to people. And this is, to clarify, when we're talking about the weight thing, it's very different than just going through a turn and sitting upright in the turn and, if it's a 90 degree, doing 6 different pivots through a 90 degree. It's very different than that. It's the rowing and anti-rowing motion that you're doing through the turn that really makes the magic happen.
Right. And when you watch video and you see people just bounding between corners, like, boom, bam, boom, like they're skiing. And this is what they're doing.
Yep.
This is exactly what they're doing. And like one thing this is a nuance, right? But like we were going fast yesterday. And then I kind of dispensed this idea that when you're pumping, it's not up and down, it's a row. So like anytime you push with your feet, to just anchor back with your lats, like draw the bars towards you, and then could you guys feel that extra?
Oh, it's insane.
That's when we
It's
started
like a
going
motor.
really fast, right?
It's like a
we were
motor.
going fast before that, and then
Yeah, like we were going through some sections of trail where you'd have, left, right, and they'd all kind of have holes. Once again, it's waves that are just turned on their side, right? They're like off-axis waves instead of being flat. And we were going through sections. There was one actually where we were going through no pedaling, right? It's an awesome rule to do if you're in a bike park. It makes the trail so fun. And it also will show you, like, I can generate even more speed. Like, you'll come into turns faster than when you were pedaling.
Yeah, I don't know that I could go faster pedaling. than
It's
we were
pretty
going.
crazy.
I think I'd be slower.
And for proof of this, look at Aaron Gwynn. He's won World Cup DH races with no chain. And on Leo Gang of all things too, which that one like
It's considered pedally.
It's considered pedally. So like that's seriously impressive. And there were basically in those moments, there was one where I came in behind you, and just from pumping, we took different lines, and I found like I found the sweetness, the nugget right in that turn. I ended up just like ripping off of that thing, and I had to jam all my brakes because it was so much speed. Like it's
crazy.
amazing, and it was generated without pedaling. Wasn't generated because I was going down a steep drop, right? It was generated because of my interaction of rowing and anti-rowing with that shape, like, timing everything right. That's sine wave.
There's something else I want to describe. This is I'll go very basic and then we'll kind of move forward. But the row, anti-row, it can be kind of, maybe unless you experience, it's hard.
Yeah.
But what I think of is, and this is the basic, and we'll get into more, but for older people, Inspector Gadget, when he has those arms and legs, and you would go over like the city landscape,
Yes.
And just like
100%.
over like
Yeah.
buildings, and there'd be a big drop, and Inspector Gadget's body would stay exactly the same,
Yep.
but his legs and arms would immediately go out.
Yes.
And then when he would come up to another building, it would be like a boulder, they would snap back in.
Yeah.
So imagine that when you see these guys go down, their upper body isn't moving, it's their legs and arms. And so that's the basic level. And then if you go more forward, it's what Lee said, where this is not like Inspector Gadget, but it's a circular motion, and there's a little timing between the arms and feet.
Yeah.
And then that's going through everything, because they're not just 90-degree angles. There are these little bowls that happen.
Yeah.
And so if you imagine Inspector Gadget doing that, but still keeping his upper body perfectly level.
Yeah.
And then you can absorb everything. And that's what Lee talked about earlier, is that shorter riders don't have that range of motion, where if like I have long arms and long legs, I can absorb a larger rock or drop farther than Jonathan could with this while keeping my body level, which is an advantage. And you can still do
Totally.
it,
Yep.
but just like Lee said, different technique has to happen.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I want to add
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Pete, you talked about the position, like you call it, Lee, the triangle of awesome.
Yeah, that's like that's the base.
And so a lot of people, one of the biggest things that I find, and it's funny because a lot of the time you'll see like a skills coach telling somebody like, just ride like with light hands, just do that. And it's hard though, because it's hard for a person to just think, okay, like, do I just ride, like take my hands off the bars basically? Like then I feel unstable. And you have a way of teaching it that I think your way of teaching is like the unique part, and why it's so effective. But basically, can you explain what the triangle of awesome is and how, like, it's your base of support, what you ride the bike through?
Sure. If you want to have sore hamstrings tomorrow, follow along.
Yeah, are all of
Oh
us sore?
yeah, mine is definitely super sore.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty funny. So, like, first of all, when we ride downhill, we want to hinge. When you hinge, unlike in a squat, your knees go forward and your hips drop basically straight down, and there's a lot of quad involved in that. If you have your quads burning on downhills, you're squatting,
Which is really common, right?
which that's 90-something% of people. Everybody.
Yep.
And you could be the kind of person who can climb for an hour, but after a minute of descending, your quads go, right? Like, I have an opinion that your quads aren't that kind of muscle, like a posture muscle. They're more of a kicking and screaming muscle, right? So
As evidenced by my toddler. Yeah.
So we want to keep your knees over the middle of your base, let's say, which would be your foot if you're in a square stance, and then roll your hips back so that you fold your torso level, and you do keep light hands. Okay, that's like the start of a deadlift. If you're a linebacker and you're about to take off the line, it's that position. Not unlike jumping a horse. Actually, jumping a horse and jumping a bicycle are essentially the same dynamic, same positions, same ellipse of love too with the reins.
Shout out to Shelly Peachel, racing Breck Epic right now. She's a podcast listener, and she also does dressage, horse jumping, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so she
That's right.
probably gets it.
She
That's
probably-
probably why she's so good on a bike.
It wouldn't hurt, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt at all. And I hear all the time women will be like, it's all been women so far. Oh, this is like, jumping my horse. So you're hinged, and that's awesome. And most of you will have a hard time just with a hinge with your feet next to each other. Next level, of course, we are cyclists. Put your feet, when you put your feet in pedal position, right, in those positions, you're going to notice, most of you, that your knee, like your forward knee is way in front of your back knee. Yeah. And there's a big change there. And I'll bet you that back knee, that back leg, that's the quad that hurts most of the time. If you're over 30 and you ride for more than a little bit, your low back will get tired, probably too. So anyway, what we want to do, picture this. And by the way, the reason for that knee offset is because when you put one of your feet 350 millimeters in front of the other foot, or these days it's 340, right? I guess things are changing. Your forward hamstring is not going to allow that to happen, right? And so that hip will get pulled forward and down. And
so we're uneven on the bike.
Most people are uneven. You guys as a group are really good, and we just had to make a slight tweak. So you're basically, most of y'all, every bump you've ever hit on a mountain bike, you've done it with a crooked body.
Mm-hmm. And that's why the bike goes crazy?
That's one of the reasons, right? Like, it's a really awful athletic position. So what we try to do, and Pete was pretty exquisite at it yesterday, is do your hinge, but keep your knees next to each other. Not pinching, but as if they share a pivot. And you're going to feel a massive stretch in your forward hamstring and probably in your rear calf, probably. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't have the range. So what that does is it locks you in. You can see this on a lot of downhillers and especially BMXers. Your knees are next to each other. They happen to be right above your bottom bracket.
Mm-hmm. Not in front.
Not in front. If you're, dude, you can see from a mile away, knees in front of the bottom bracket. So, Jonathan, how do your quads feel right now? Oh, they kind of burn, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So you basically lock your knees in above the bottom bracket, and you create this triangle of awesome. Mm-hmm. And this is deeper, like, in knowledge for me, right? That creates a really stable base. And one of the bonuses of it is the angle between your hips and your femurs are the same on both sides. Mm-hmm. So you can ride with both hips, and you're way stronger. You're way well. How did it feel, Pete?
Yeah, so that was one of the things that made it so much better for me is, like you said, setting up for a deadlift. I always learned you screw your feet into the ground where you tension everything up. So it's like twisting a washcloth. If you twist a washcloth, it's super firm and sturdy. Mm-hmm. So rather than like pinching my knees on my frame, I really screwed in my feet and pulled the triangle firm, I guess would be the way to do it. But that way, like you said, it changed every time I hit something, my body and the bike just absorbed it, right? It was like I was in the right position once we changed that, and then everything got easier. It didn't change the way I rode. Everything was less.
It's crazy, like bumps, turns, jumps,
everything.
Rocky shoots, lines, drops, like everything improved. It's, and I think a lot of it is because, if you tell a person to ride with light hands and they just put it into their feet, but it's not a stable base of support, then they're not going to be stable.
They're not going to be stable. And also, like, as you all know, like, mountain biking is a little bit dynamic. So to maintain static weight and try to keep your hands weightless is hard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? But then remember, we're not static, are we?
Yeah.
So we're always very light or very heavy. Of course, in the light moment, your hands are light. Everything's light. Mm-hmm. You weigh 0. And in the heavy moment, like, okay, imagine you have a pogo stick and you try to balance on it without it bouncing. Like, how hard would that be?
Tough.
How tense would your hands get?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
But then bounce, right? And so that balance is dynamic. So when we have this, like, quote, locked in, or let's say use the word engaged, triangle of awesome, a good hinge, the inner unit of your core, we can talk about if you want, is on, and you're being dynamic, you have a lot more balance, a lot more, right?
And you can't hinge, or if your triangle of awesome isn't set, you can't hinge correctly or have your core engaged. Right? Yeah. Like, that's the step one. So as soon as I firmed up my knees, then my core was engaged, and then I could hinge because my core was engaged.
That's fascinating, dude. I haven't heard that.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
That was definitely step 1, and I couldn't do step 2 or 3 without doing step 1. And as soon as I did step 1, the rest fell into place.
It makes total sense. Step 1 being your knee alignment, because if that's not aligned, your hips are crooked. and then your core is going to be compromised. And then, like, I have a theory, right, that the lizard that runs your body, right, doesn't want it to be dismembered, you know, and it wants to, and it wants
keep things together.
Yeah, especially like your brain and spinal cord, right?
Yeah.
And I have a theory. I see this. Actually, it's not a theory. This is experience. Yeah. That when you're crooked, your lizard knows, dude, like, I'm fundamentally not a sound structure right now. And that's going to add nervousness. It's going to cut your power. And I believe firmly that, like, whatever I want to hear from Pete on this, because, you know, crit racer, right? Like, if your core is not on, you cannot access full power, right?
Oh, for sure. And what I always think about is when I'm attacking or putting out real power in a road race, I'm like engaged, right? Everything's switched on, and then that's when I can actually put out real power. The rest of the time I'm floating at like some percentage of full engagement. But
there you go, right? And so that would apply too to hitting bumps, pumping, braking hard. I mean, like, I forget the exact math, but like, if you're braking and pulling a G, right? Like, it's like 1.8 times your body weight or something like that. Or you could potentially be pulling 3 Gs in a corner. So you need to be strong just to, I mean, you'll get the jowls of doom. Like your cheeks will fall down, right? Yeah. Pull down. Maybe you can brace that too.
Yeah.
Maybe. But this is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, so like the biggest example I have is technical climbing, because it's so A-B. Like, I made it or I didn't. It's easy to measure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, I was in Peoria, Illinois, and they had a thing called the unclimbable climb.
Ooh, that's a good challenge. You're excited for that.
Well, and of course it needs a new name, right?
Spoiler alert.
That was good.
Well, I'm not a terrible rider so much. So, and I did my core, and I drove with my hips like on the rip row, and I got right up, and everybody was impressed. But I was like, you guys, like, this is not magic. Like, everybody in the group is about to do this. Everybody. And they did. And there's these points where we just kind of, like, your legs are turning, and all of a sudden they stop turning.
Yeah.
Like, it's not because you, like, couldn't turn the gear. It's like the switch goes off in your head. But if you engage your core, right? I'm looking at Pete, like, that switch might not go off, right? And you might be able to sustain, especially if it's technical.
That's an interesting point on the technical climbs. I've had days where it's just like you can't get up anything. You know what I mean? And it may be because you are excessively fatigued, and as a result, you're not engaging right. Yep. But that's something, like, I honestly cannot wait to get out to a particular switchback and actually put a lot of this stuff in practice right now that I have in my mind.
So I recently, a few weeks ago, was out riding, and I just sensed a disturbance in the force, kind of. I was like, and my shoulders were hurting more than they normally do. And I was like, dude, you know what? Something's wrong with my form. I was like, this is not cool.
Yeah.
And so I teach for a living, and we have other people who teach, and Kevin Stifler is my main guy.
Yeah.
And I trained him up from a square, you know, really like from the bottom. But then I contacted him and said, Kevin, I need you to coach me, dude. Right? Like, I need it. It's time, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing this long, horrible climb. It's called Belcher Hill. It's down by Golden. And I wasn't doing so good. And I even told him I've been having a hard time with this. And he's all, sir, your core is off. I'm all, huh? He's all, do you know how I know? I'm all, how? He's like, because your elbows are out.
Because are you compensating? Is that why?
He
like,
said, no, I just didn't have my lats engaged. And so my elbows were out just a little bit. And I was like, oh, dude, of course. So then, of course, your lats are part of your core, and they attach to your glutes, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I was just like, oh, thanks, Kevin. And I brought that in. And then just doing that action subconsciously, like, braced my inner core. And ta-da, easier. Like, and I know better, right? Yeah. But it's so good sometimes to be told. And, like, how many times did I tell you guys to get lower over the weekend?
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, all the time.
So Kevin too. I'm out. I'm like, all right, dude, here we go. Segment 1. How was it, Kevin? He's like, that was pretty smooth, but you got to be lower. I'm like, no way. So we go again, right? And I get lower, and it's better. And I'm like, how was that, Kevin? You got to be lower, dude. So I found it, and I think you mentioned this. It's something like 6 inches below your wherever when you think you're really low, and if you're really good at being low and you think you're low, try 4 to 6 inches lower.
Yeah, do more.
So I have a question on this, because you've said this maybe more than any other student you've ever said to about me getting lower. Like
Because you're very tall.
Hey, Lo, or hey, Nate, nice to see you get lower.
The Christmas cards say "Merry Christmas, Happy," and get lower.
Yeah, exactly.
So in the high hinge, my quads can be deactivated.
Right.
But when I get low in hinge, I can do that for a little while, but then I get so tired in my quads, and then I just can't do it anymore. Is that a position thing, or does that just happen if you get really low?
You know, if so, by the way, like a hinge is to fold your torso level. You can do this really low with your knees bent. You can do this really high with your legs straight. When your legs are in the high hinge, number one, it takes way more hamstring, so a lot of you can't do it. But when you can do it, your quads will turn off 100%.
You look like Matthew Vanderpool.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly what you looked like, Nate.
Yeah. So you see,
Wait, say that again, Pete.
You looked exactly like Matthew Vanderpool.
That's the best.
that's pretty good, right? Yeah. And so that's zero quad, all hamstring basically. But when you get in a low hinge, there's more quad, but not a ton. It's like the start point of a deadlift, a good one. So like Nate, something to try is just it sounds like your knees have tracked forward just a little bit. And by the way, your knees tracking forward and your shoulders coming high are related to each other.
Oh yeah, it makes sense.
Because it pulls you out of your hinge.
Yeah.
So your butt comes forward and your shoulders come up, which is like standard I'm tired or I'm afraid behavior, right? So just take your knees and try pushing them back like an inch. Like everybody can do that, right?
I think the mental cue I might have on that is when I get low, make sure my butt is back. Because if that happens, it's going to bring my knees back and my shoulders down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my quads never get tired on descents. Basically ever.
We don't care, John.
And what,
That sounds great.
no, what I'm getting at.
easy. Let
No,
it
no,
I know.
no,
I'm
no,
just
that
giving
feels
you a hard
boring.
time.
What gives out are the hamstrings and glutes. That's what starts to get truly tired.
Yeah, that's when you know you're doing it right.
And like we're gonna be doing EWS North Star next weekend, and we're gonna have like a 12 or 13 minute stage,
Yeah.
and that one has some pedaling in it. And also, I mean, Nate, you can speak to this. When we didn't pedal yesterday down those things, were you breathing hard afterward?
Oh, yeah.
Right, like
100%.
like not pedaling, and we're still completely exhausted. On those stages, that's gonna be the tough thing. Like, so Lee on long climb or long descents like that, because that's common. People are like, yeah, I'm totally fine on my normal trails. Then I go to Downeyville, or I go to Colorado, or I go to Moab, Utah, and I ride long descent, something like that. And then then I really start to get fatigued, that sort of stuff. How do you manage that? Or
like one thing would be a big one is this specific bike mobility hamstring. Well, no, it's not that specific. I think everybody should have a good hamstring and a strong core. That's basic humanity, right? Start with that so you can get into the positions. With a beginner, I just tell them if you're on a downhill, be low. So you have to make the habit, and whatever scrolls by you can deal with. But as you get the hang of this stuff, if it's smooth and you can see that it's smooth or not, there's nothing going on, you can go to your high hinge and then turn your quads off. And basically, you see a lot of pro, like XC, cyclocross racers doing this. You can do a lot of resting. And then when you see something coming, go back into your low hinge and execute. That's what you'll see these guys doing.
I watch EWS for that too. That's because these guys have long days,
Right.
long stages. Watch some of those recaps on Pink Bike, and you'll see them in a fully relaxed position. Then they get to a drop, and it's just boom.
Yeah, and it's instant. It's instant. And so, like, here's another maybe tip, okay? And this applies for the road bike as well. Like, do you guys ever, like, when you get out of the saddle and start pedaling, do you feel like more quad? Do you feel your quads go?
I mean, depending on the position. Usually, I feel like I'm passing when I go stand out of the saddle. I'm usually passing it to the posterior chain more than the.
That's
anterior.
where you want to have it. I know a lot of people where their quads will just blow up on when they get out of the seat, and on the mountain bike. So like say you're on that enduro stage and there's a roller. It sounds like you're doing it right. Like understand that I'm going to simplify. Like. No, I don't know if it's simplification. Like when we're on a bike, we should be somewhere in the hinge continuum. You can stand upright. You can be hinged on a downhill. If you're in the drops on a road bike, you're pretty freaking hinged, right?
Yeah.
You're hinged. So everything should happen on the hinge continuum. So when you come out of the saddle to get some strokes to get over one of those rises, like bring your hips forward in that hinge pattern. And then like Jonathan said, then a lot of the work is in the posterior chain. Way more powerful, right, Pete?
Yeah, for sure.
It's something that
Can I say something else? If you're tired and you're like losing your ability to like control your bike, stop.
That's a super. That was actually the point that we're on the same wavelength. Lee, you and I are going through the sine wave of love right now.
We are, and the butterflies of magic. We have those at North Star.
We had those, butterflies everywhere. That's a really good point because sometimes you get so tired, right? Or you can be going so fast, right? And if you feel like you're going too fast,
you are.
Or if you feel like you're too tired, you are, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay to turn it down.
Yeah, and
or stop, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not racing, have a stop. Like we were stopping. Like I did a full run the other day on my own, and that's fun in its own way, right? Yeah. But if you're pinning it, right, just stop between segments. Like I have a feeling that peak experiences are kind of amazing, right? They're peak experiences, like flow states. So like if you can like break a long downhill into 4 pieces during which you can go hard, get her done, and achieve flow, then that's a huge stoke, and that's enough to last a week. And so that's, I think, better and more satisfying, and by the way, safer than trying to do a long one at 66%. Right, and it's just not fun to like drag your brakes and be exhausted down a hill, right? So stopping is totally kosher. And by the way, like I've been listening to this guy Ken Hill. He's a motorcycle road race dude.
Yeah.
And his podcasts are great. And a whole episode on when should I brake, and he's like, when you think you're going too fast.
Podcast over.
Done. He had other nuance about cornering, but that's what he said, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Nate, you mentioned something with flat versus level feet, being something that helped you too.
Lee, there's a long time where I thought I always had to have one foot down. If I'm turning left, I always have to have my right foot down all the way, no matter what the terrain is. And then I think I've improved a lot by having level feet in some cases, or maybe at the beginning level feet, and then we worked on kind of pushing into the turn. Can you kind of describe that about why would you want to do
Sure. So like everything that I know of that's worthwhile is on a continuum. And on one end of the continuum, there's just this like sick berm that was actually like measured. We used to, when I built pump tracks, I would measure the angles of the berms because you kind of know the speeds that fast people go.
Yes.
And you know, because of velocity and radius, how many G's they're pulling and what the resulting net angle is. So you make your berm steeper than that.
You can feel when math is good. You ride good math. It's incredible.
Math is good, and measuring is free, by the way, generally, right? So on one end of the continuum, there's a berm, and a berm is not cornering. A berm like that is pumping sideways. That's on one end of the continuum. So keep your feet level. You have way more range of motion, way more pumping power. On the other end of this continuum is a corner that here you go, basic rider. You just want to make the turn. It maybe it's sketchy. You're worried about it. You're going to put your outside foot down, and putting the outside foot down like that, especially if you can like engage it, like the way you'd engage a ski. There are a lot of A's in engage, right? Engage.
Yeah.
That was a long radius turn. Then that gives you the least amount of pumping power, but good edge. And so there's a continuum. And in the very, very beginning, I would say, if there's a berm, feet level. If there's a flat turn, foot down. And so like Nate, he expressed really kind of vehemently that he wanted to work on flat turns, right? And so the first thing we did is I asked him to do a figure 8 in the parking lot. And what I had taught him before, he had learned. Like he had good classic, like foot down, lean the bike, turn the hips, form. Awesome. But it is static, right? And so what we did in the parking lot is we taught him how to pump corners. And you can pump a corner more effectively with your feet level, honestly, right? So we started to like scallop and like scoop and pump the corners, and we had to add air to your rear wheel because you were hitting it so hard.
Nice, ripping the tire off the rim.
Yeah, total brop.
That's some points right there.
Throwing some devil's horns. That's brop with 3 A's. And so what happened was the more confident you got with the pumping, the more level your feet stayed. You see riders with their feet at a 45-degree angle. They're cranks. That's a compromise of pump and edge. And so this is what happens, right? As you become more confident and as like the grand unified theory of shred like percolates into your nervous system, right?
That's the true process right there.
Yeah. I'll tell you when I'm done, right? I have 30 years on it so far. So then you start to pump more often. And so your predisposition will be you'll enter corners with level feet. If you have the triangle of awesome dialed, you ready? There's no real functional difference between left foot forward and right foot forward.
Yeah, it's true.
So then you switch and right turn, right foot forward, left turn, left foot forward. And so that's the big thing I wanted for Nate was to like become more dynamic and really apply power into the corner. And you did it, dude.
Yeah,
All you
were
impressive.
cruising
I'm
yesterday.
a lot faster on flat. I dropped Pete on a flat corner.
you did.
When we were
This is the first time ever in anything.
Yeah, no, it was amazing.
we were doing the no pedal thing and just pumping and ripping down like a fun trail called Coaster up there at North Star, and I was like, cool, Lee's on my tail. I can hear his tires. You know what I mean? I'm like listening to your tires behind me and everything else. And then we get to the bottom and I'm like, that's Nate. That wasn't Lee. Like it blew my mind.
Yeah, thank you, Lee.
It's so cool.
You really have. It took a while to sink in, and that's the thing too. Like I knew all the things, and I just had to just keep practicing
And hear it differently or have a good. I think that's just
really
the thing
just
though.
doing it too a lot of times.
Yeah,
On the
doing it-
instruction side of things too. Like it takes a very like you're a very good teacher. Like you are very much sensei. Like
Thank you.
Because you can like look at a person and then understand how they can get tied in to that sign ways that they need to have, but they need to do it maybe in a slightly different way than another person.
Yeah,
It's
there's like
a
the
different experience.
methodology or like the flow chart that I've actually designed out of how to teach, like in general.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we're human. So can I say something about Nate?
Yeah.
So there's this bell curve of riders. Nate's outside it now too, big time.
Oh, yeah, for
like
sure,
on the fast end.
For everybody that thinks that like, oh yeah, Nate's like, because you've probably listened to this podcast for some time. If you're thinking this sort of a thing, you're like, Nate's the guy that needs to work on bike handling. Everyone needs to work on bike handling, but Nate he's probably faster than you if you're listening to this. Like,
Statistically speaking, there's no question that he's faster than you.
it's pretty crazy.
It's 2 years ago was different, and I am better.
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to be really bad, so I'm improving.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to say
decent now.
I'm better because that sounded equivocative, right?
Yeah.
What I'm telling you is that you're really good, and I'm decent, right? And you're leading me, and I'm on your wheel, and when you're connecting shapes that I miss, and I'm pedaling, that's proper good speed. Like you know, like the thing that's missing right now is just jumping. But that'll come.
Segue.
With that, and actually, we're going to go into some live questions from people.
Yeah,
because,
fun.
First question talks about jumping.
Exactly right. Somebody says, "Hey Lee, how do I stop becoming a dead sailor when jumping?" So we should describe what a dead sailor is first.
When you jump and you're just fixed in the air and your limbs are just locked. Yeah. And your teeth
you're watching right now,
and your teeth are gritting. That's considered a dead sailor.
And we've all felt that because you feel like you're along for a ride in which you did not sign up for.
Yeah, you're a hunk of meat hurtling to an uncertain fate.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. It's a terrifying feeling, and you feel like my inevitable contact with the ground is going to be very unpleasant with this trajectory I'm following.
Right, like that.
I can't do anything about it.
That forward rotation is the process of being flung onto your face.
Yes.
And sometimes you get saved because there's a landing.
Yeah.
But sometimes you go too fast, you hit a bigger jump, and the landing, like if you're rotating at like a rate of X degrees per millisecond, it's just a matter of time. You just hopefully you land first. Okay, so how do you avoid the dead sailor?
Yep.
Picture the transition from, let's say it's just a simple jump, like where it's flat ground, 45-degree lip, maybe 8 feet out is a 30-degree landing. That would be like a good, like kind of aggressive but nice learning tabletop, let's say, right? When you transition from level to the lip, your bars are going to rotate back 45 degrees. Your bike's going to rotate 45 degrees. So just like imagine that. Like that's a lot of handlebar movement, right? And I promise you that you are not pulling. You're either following YouTube advice and pushing into the lip, which basically pushes your body back. Therefore, the back tire catches and you get flung forward, or you're just too static. And honestly, like a lot of you who are good trail riders will say, oh, I can hit like long, low trajectory jumps just fine. Quote, DH jumps. Yeah. But dirt jumps scare the heck out of me. It's because a dirt jump, like a mellow, like a reasonable dirt jump is a 45-degree takeoff. Yep. A proper dirt jump is a 60 or 70-degree takeoff.
They look like a wall.
They look like, dude, yeah, I know, right? And time and space like could just constrict and make that thing look vertical. Yeah. So the big thing here is like your bike's going to change angle as you go through the lip. So you just have to pull the bars to you. Row. Do the row. Like push, your feet will push into the lip. All of your body weight always should be in your feet. No body weight should ever be in your hands. There it is. So you're going to row through the lip. You can draw those hands back. If you draw the hands back, like imagine, right? Like there's a lever between your bottom bracket and your hands. For me, it's 78 centimeters long. And then there's a lever between the bottom bracket and your rear hub, which on my bike right now is 430. There's a leverage ratio there. Just to say it's 2-to-1, easy. When you row through a lip, by the way, this is how you bunny hop. You're pushing with your feet, so that could be 500 pounds. If you're Pete, it's 2,000 megatons. Yeah, his pop is ridiculous, right? Yep. It's a lot of deadlifting, right?
Yeah, I need to do more now that I know.
There you go. So you're getting that pressure from your feet, but more importantly, you're levering through the frame, and that's levering the rear wheel into the ground. So that gives you takeoff. So, okay, back to this. You're coming into the lip, into the face of the jump. You row through the lip. So when the back tire leaves the ground, it's actually being like levered and flicked into the air. And this is important. Rather than freezing, you immediately go into an anti-row. And as soon as you get into the air, you bring your feet up and you push your hands away and then meet the landing. And so it's like the Ark of the Covenant, right? Like you arc through the lip, you arc through the air. As you pass through apogee, that's where you're going to throw your little whip, by the way, or your little like bar turn, right? Or take a tear off, right? Or adjust your clutch lever, and then you're going to nose the bike into the ground. So it's really simple the way we do this nowadays. It's like pumping, hopping, jumping, and cornering are all row anti-row. Yep. And that's the deal.
One of my favorite things that you taught me yesterday was the speed at which you take whatever it is you're accommodating, like whatever the wave, whether it's a rock or anything, your speed corresponds with the speed that you row and anti-row. And so that was a good switch that got flipped in my brain, where like watching John take those little doubles as fast as he possibly could, he just had to row faster and anti-row faster to accommodate, right? But that means the finesse of you hitting something has to do with your speed, and the correlation between the way you row and anti-row should be directly correlated to the speed you're taking something.
Right, like the terrain is scrolling below you.
Yeah.
Right. So your bike is going to make angle changes. It's going to do it. Right. So it would behoove you to be in phase with that.
And exactly. And I feel like people know what they're supposed to do, but their timing is wrong. Or
these are fast movements, dude.
Super fast.
Like when Jonathan was hitting that jump, Jonathan was jumping a jump easy yesterday. So when you want to get air, you row all the way through the lip, and then you anti-row in the air. Jonathan, it was so easy. And like some of the rest of us were working on basic jumping. So Jonathan needed like an extra AP assignment. So I challenged him to quote, push through, which is a BMX-y thing. And when you push through, you row earlier. And as soon as the front tire tips its way over the lip, you anti-row and push the bike across. You do the same thing when you're going across a big rock or hopping a log. Same deal. And okay, so like how long, let's say that lip was 5.5 feet. you were going fast. At 15 miles an hour, that 5.5 feet is a quarter second, but you weren't going 15.
Yeah, it's probably going 30 or over.
You're going 30, so that's a quarter second. And he needs to get that, like, basically the second part of the row and the complete anti-row in that moment of time.
And that's like 30 inches of travel in your arms
Right.
in a quarter of a second.
Right, and the more powerful you are and the faster you can punch, Bruce Lee style, like the faster you can ride safely. That's the deal, right?
Yep.
Do you have that on video?
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
do.
do.
Push
I
it?
can send it to him.
Well, put him on the forum.
Yeah.
And do you have it where he took it as an actual jump too?
Yeah.
Okay, let's put both those of Jonathan, because to me, that's a really interesting way to see that. Where one way is lots of air, and another way is like with the row where he goes across it, where
My front
there's like
tire-
almost no air,
Yeah, my front tire stayed on the ground over the top.
and that's
did.
faster.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're
I mean,
racing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
Most of the
spending
time.
Yeah, most of the time, if you're spending time up in the air, it's probably going to be a bit slower than being lower.
But that's
Right.
like
Unless it's really rocky or something where
Exactly.
you want to be not on the ground.
probably for us, that's not motocross. That would be important, but for us, like
Yeah, we don't
People
think
don't
of it
need to
very
get-
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
most well, first of all, most listeners have been pushing through for years. They just don't know any different, right? You're sucking it up, right? Excuse me, sorry about that. I just lost it. But I'll say this: I found something different. Like traditionally, when you want to absorb a jump, and Jonathan was doing this first, you just push down really hard before the jump, and then as you go up the jump, like you basically unweight, pull your feet towards you.
Yep.
It's a very up and down thing. And if it's a small enough jump, you can do that. But once the jump gets taller than your legs are long, right, or your effective range of motion, it needs to be that row anti-row. Otherwise, you'll get bucked. And a lot of you guys, especially like for a water bar, let's say you're going really fast and you try to absorb a water bar, but the back tire kicks, you really, like at that level of speed and aggression, you need it to be a row anti-row.
Yeah, completely agree. Something that another point on this one, or I guess another question. I'm excited this one was asked because it's going to lead me into, and possibly you too, into a bit of a rant on modern geometry. I'm saying that in quotes.
Right.
So, Trey says, how do you estimate appropriate body weight to put over the front tire over a given surface or corner, and how do you flirt with the limit?
What a
So-
great
Awesome
question,
right? Because
So-
can I just jump in really quick to like set the scene for this?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
So I want I'm going to give you a tall tee if you're a golfer right now, right? We're gonna. So this modern geometry thing is tossed around by bike companies a ton right now, and what they're really referring to, Lee, right, is like a longer front center, meaning that like from the bottom bracket forward, the frame is longer.
Yep.
And then there are bike reviewers that are reviewing these bikes. And what they say is like, oh, well, this is a modern geometry bike, one of the new ones. So you totally have to change the way you ride. And you have to get your weight. I just saw Twitch with me.
I know, right?
And they're like, you have to ride it differently because you have to it's too hard to get weight over the front tire. And I've fundamentally disagreed with that. And I found solace in the fact that you also fundamentally disagree with that. I felt like I found
do.
a safe place and a good friend when I
I
heard
think
that.
I think we're safe. I'm still gonna go out and that one Strava you have, dude,
Yeah.
that's not gonna last.
So, but why? So I guess talking about maybe the best way to take about this, you take it however you wish, but whether it's talking about modern geometry and that sort of reach thing in that relationship, or talking about just worrying about how much weight you should distribute over the front.
Okay,
However you want to unpack it.
Here's a thought, right? When all of your weight is in your feet, that's 100%, right? So none on the seat, none on the hands, honestly. You're in the middle of the bike. And if there's no weight on the bar, you are able to pull and push the bar and manage terrain. If you have weight forward on the bar, it makes it really hard to pull push. If you have weight back on the bar, which is what people do when they're afraid, it's hard to control the bike. And basically, this is a terrible fact. I said this last time I was here. If you're a little too far forward, you get beaten up and you flop over the bars. If you're too far back, you get beaten up and flung over the bars. Right?
Because it's a trebuchet.
Yeah, it's a trebuchet, full on.
Yeah,
And I
flips you over the front.
have a non-union broken collarbone right here, right? And to prove that.
Yeah.
So the only safe place to be, honestly, is in the middle of the bike. Heavy feet, light hands. before modern geometry, right? TM. Like our bottom brackets were relatively close to the middle of our bikes. And so like, let's say when you put all your weight on your feet, by the way, one reason like a road bike or cross bike just corners at such a high level is because your feet are pretty close to the middle of the bike. Right? Like the front center isn't so long and the stays might be long, right? So that's a thought, right? And it's more analogous to where you put the binding on a alpine ski.
Yep, totally.
Okay, so traditionally bikes have had like a little bit of a rearward weight bias, but not a lot. And so that puts enough weight on the bar on the front wheel. And so level one, you have neutral weight. 40% of your weight roughly is on the front wheel. Your hands are light, so the bars are able to like track your undulations, and you can corner correctly, right? One thing that's going on with these modern bikes is that front center is getting longer. In some cases, the rear ends are still getting shorter, but more companies are lengthening the rear ends, but they're not lengthening the rear ends in proportion with the lengthening of the front ends. So your weight bias is getting farther back. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a big deal to have 65%, 68% on the back wheel. So when you're neutral, of course, that's less weight on the front end, right? So like people will kind of say in kind of like a big wooden mallet way that, oh, bro, you got to put more weight on the bars, right? Yeah. What I would say is, first of all, like something you said just now, Jonathan, it's like you have bike makers saying you got to change the ride because you can't put enough weight on the front end. Yeah. Like, dude, that's not good biking. Yeah, like what if you just kind of like found a spot that worked everywhere, right? But anyway, you know, so what I would say is when you, and I feel this, I'm a human being, right? When you put weight on the front end of the bike, it doesn't track through bumps as well. It physically can't corner as well. You get beat up, right? So let's say you have less weight on the front end. Okay. Well, what we've learned today, class, is that when we corner, we're heavy. We load the bike. Depending on the mood and the corner, maybe you go 2x body weight, 3x body weight, 4x, 5x body weight. Okay. So then your modern Broham geometry bike has 32% of your weight on the front end. Well, if you double the weight, it's twice as much, and that's more. So at the basic level 2 Kung Fu level, you just load the whole bike through your feet.
And you're going to have more.
The whole bike is going to be heavier. You're going to have more.
You're saying like the bike is connected, like the front and rear wheels are on the same bike.
That's amazing.
That's so crazy. And you know what I would like to say is your body alignment. Your body position is a function of your proportions. It was decided before you were born, right? And that's what it is. And the bike does what it does, right? So that's level 1, right? Level 2, no, that's level 2. Level 86, right? and I remember we just did this the other day with Nate, and we did a little of this yesterday. Is this row anti-row business, where as you enter the entry of a corner, imagine you're on flat ground and you're about to drop into a hole. You would like anti-row and push the front end into the hole. The front of a corner is the same thing. It's just sideways, basically. The beginning of a corner is the same thing sideways. So what we were practicing yesterday is we were not putting body weight into the bars. We were putting power, upper body power into the bars. And that's loading the front end. And it's not unlike skiing, alpine skiing, where you're bolted to the middle of the ski. That's where your weight is, dude, right? No matter what.
You can't change that.
Can't change that. But you have this lever in form of a boot. So when you come into the corner, the way you would lever with your bars, like lever the front end into a turn, you lever the front of the ski into a turn, they both bite. And then as you row through the turn, or as on the skis, as you lay into the back of the ski, you get that propulsion and the snap. So I would say with the modern bike, with any bike, the fore-aft weight distribution is determined by the bike. If you increase the amount of weight, then you get more on both ends, and that'll suffice. If you add this row anti-row business, then there's a whole other level.
Yeah,
honestly.
So something interesting with this photographic proof of this sort of a thing. If you look at the best ascenders, Loic Bruni, looking at Nate Pearson, you know.
I was gonna say I just pointed to you,
Jonathan Lee.
if you look at them, Loick's a great example of this. Like I can't get enough of watching that guy's technique. It's incredible. He's like a hovercraft. Forgive me, but they are very low. And when I say very low, sometimes you won't even be able to see the chin of their helmet.
Right.
When there's a photo that's looking at them, you won't even be able to see the chin bar of their helmet.
And you don't see their
Because it's behind
elbows
the handlebars.
sometimes either.
Yep.
Their elbows are right behind their hands.
They're tucked in, and DH bikes, if anything, like this whole thing about like you need to weight the front more on these modern geometry bikes. Well, DH bikes have had the front wheel way further out in front for a long time.
Yeah, we're just catching up to that on trail bikes.
So, and it's not like, you have to change fundamentally everything the way you ride and suddenly just lean forward and put your body forward. It doesn't help.
No.
Instead, and I think that honestly, and with all due respect to the bike reviewers, this is just bringing out, weaknesses in your game, so to speak. Like meaning that like your technique isn't sound, and this brings it out.
Yeah.
Right?
When I read that, I'm just like, wow. Okay, I'm not gonna read this review anymore.
Yeah.
Because this guy doesn't ride the way I do, and so our worlds don't overlap like that.
Yeah. So my point is get low. And when you're putting energy into your bike, you're getting low, right? You're hinging deeper.
Yep.
You're going through, and when that's happening, Tucker's pulling up a picture right now of him just like tucking, but you can see these guys are so good at getting low. So Tucker will put that photo into the forum. It's much more of a low thing, and I love that of when when you end up magnifying your weight through G forces through a turn, and when you're rowing and anti-rowing and making those shapes. It is more weight.
It is more weight. You told me one thing yesterday that really stuck with me. You said I had to take control of my bars or take control of my front wheel, and it's not it's not that I wasn't. It's not that I was unweighting it correctly. It's that I wasn't utilizing the rest of me with the front wheel. So it's not that I put more weight on the front wheel. It's just that I picked and choose where it goes and how it's weighted.
Right. Like when you went into holes or down backsides, like the first run, and that was fast, honestly, way outside the bell curve again. You were pumping well, but you were pumping in a flat way.
Yeah.
So you would your bike would go like land flat out in a hole maybe. And I was trying to, and you picked it right up. Like I wanted you to anti-row or push the front end into those shapes.
And I think that's what the reviewers. I don't know what they're trying to say,
Yeah.
but that's the way to utilize your front wheel correctly. It's not that you just carry more weight over your front wheel. It's that you use the front wheel when you need it.
Yeah, and there's a difference between weight and power. So body, weight is just technically you being pulled to the center of the earth.
Yep.
Right. I use weight a little bit more colloquially in the way, and it just any force you put into your feet. Like I would consider that to be weight. If it goes from your body down, I would just call it weight. No, I'm sorry. Time out. Like 9.8 meters per second squared, right? Body weight in the feet.
Yeah.
Now, that's what body weight is, period. Power is this muscular energy of exerting force in some direction. So if you exert force into your feet, you have weight and power.
Yeah.
Right? Here's a rule for you. We should never exert weight into our hands. We should exert power. Yeah. Big difference.
That's perfect.
That's a really good way to describe it.
That's a good way to speak.
He's so good.
I know. I was just thinking, I want you here every month.
I know. I don't want
fun,
to leave.
Well, I was just thinking we could have you for maintenance. Like we need tune-ups just like everybody else, right? We could just have you around.
The next thing I want to do is a cross session.
That'll be awesome.
Because it's the same things, but in my mind, I haven't made I've been on my cross bike for a while, but I haven't made the connection, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same.
Oh, that'd be so fun.
It's the same thing, right?
Same principles with high seat. So that means high hinging only, no low hinging. And then your reach is different, right? By the way, I did this class the other day, and we had some A's in there, some good riders.
Yeah.
And someone asked, "Hey, are you on the hoods or the drops?" And I turned to the main, serious dude. And I'm like, "What do you do?" He's like, "I'm always on the hoods." And I was like, "What?" And so we got on the pump track and did some stuff. And I was like, try the drops, dude. And I kind of showed him about the core and the lats. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is a whole different level.
Because it allows more leverage.
It allows more core engagement. Like, and like we've talked about the optimal distance between your hands and your feet and how that relates to your body. Maybe we'll do that now. When you're in the drops, like you're closer to that. And my quote road bike, which is a 33-pound steel touring bike with racks and fenders, when I'm in the drops, it's really close to my mountain bike setup. So if I want to sprint, because I'm competitive, I'm an idiot. So if I end up in a group of roadies, I gotta do something.
Oh yeah,
right?
Got to
for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But just as a data point, like the handling of the bike is much, the amount of power you have to lay into a trail is a lot higher on the drop. So I just got an email from this guy. His name is Omar Dickinson. He's really good age group dude and races fast. And he said he's just been experimenting with it. It's a whole other level. So we would do the same stuff, but with more limited range of motion, basically.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to cover on this is, so first of all, I got a new bike this year. I got the SB150. They changed the reach, right? I was on the SB55 before. So I busted out I dusted off the trig upstairs. It was probably entirely wrong. and I started going through and looking at what setup I needed to get. Basically because, man, there's so many things that affect where your hands go, right? So you've got the reach of the bike, you've got the stack of the bike, and then you've got the spacers that you have. You've got your head angle that also ends up affecting all of this. You've got the stem length, you've got the rise of your bars, you've got the roll of your bars, right?
Or I would call that setback, which is the distance of your hands behind the stem clamp, which is a number that kind of comes up in motocross.
It totally is. That's how we all buy our handlebars, based on that figure basically alone, and upsweep. But basically that's it. Right. So all of those things affect where your hands go, and my brain broke a bit. And so I got the bike and I was like, I think I need a 35 millimeter stem instead of going with, a 50 millimeter stem. So I got this 35 millimeter stem. And then I got this weird like bike seat thing for my son, and it ended up raising that stem up, and it's just it didn't feel right. So I went to a 50 millimeter stem, and I'm like, I can't really tell if it feels better. But I kept feeling these moments where when I was rowing and anti-rowing over a jump or something else, I have a lack of tension and control at different points.
Right.
When I'm going through the sine wave, there's interruptions where there's like a lack of tension, right?
Or engagement would be a better word.
Engagement, yeah. So I have this lack of engagement. And yesterday we did something really cool. At the end of the day, I was like, I need to find, because when you stand on your rip row, we set the height of the handlebars, with a clamp basically, and we find the ideal height. And it's not an ideal height where we have a lot of we can shrug our shoulders freely.
It's where they're like locked down.
It's where they're locked down, right? So we measured that, and then we measured my bike, and we found out that it was wrong. And you have a whole book on this, Dialed, right?
Yeah. Dialed, a book and ebook I've been on this a while now, and I have I think a pretty good Dialed.
Nice.
Are you saying it's dialed?
It's pretty dialed. The book is called Dialed, the secret math of the perfect mountain bike setup.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. We looked at it, and I was 3 centimeters?
3 centimeters.
Too long.
Yep.
And when we looked at myself in a full, so then we went back to the rip row and we made it 3 centimeters too long. And I tried to do the motion.
You couldn't, you were immediately like gagging. You were like, oh, yeah, this is not cool.
It felt bad.
Yeah. So you like when you stand up on the bike, right? Like you want to, like when you're making peak torque, you want to stand all the way up, and you want to have, and so ideally, right, your arms are straight, like you're holding a heavy bar,
yes, like
right?
farmer carry.
Like farmer carry, right?
Yeah.
And your whole core is engaged and all that. And that's the number we found for you. When your stem's too long, and this, dude, we're talking with you, it's 3 centimeters.
Yeah.
We when we lengthen the lever by 3 centimeters, and you go to make that peak power, you go into shoulder shrugging.
Yes, my shoulders
and
would
arm
shrug.
bending. So people, that looks like weakness, and it looks like, man, I'm getting a lot of upper trap stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And so for me, as sensitive as my shoulders are, if I demo a bike or I get on someone else's bike, that work that pushes the work up. So then that you felt, and then when you were in your hinge, pulling and pushing the bars,
yep.
you got 3 reps, and you were like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I did not like it. It didn't
Right.
feel right.
Yeah, it takes the work away from your core into your arms and shoulders, right?
And something hasn't felt right about that bike, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I've been toying with it and trying to figure it out. So anyways, with now we're going to drop the stack, go to a 35 millimeter stem and check it out and see how it works. And I think we're going to be really close.
I think it's going to be perfect in that way. And then you mentioned something about like, well, you didn't like the 35 because the way it felt in the saddle.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. So nerd alert, but bikes are getting more upright seat tube angles because traditionally a lot of mountain bikes had really backward, seat tube angles that put you further over the rear wheel, and it made climbing tough, right? And I've produced some more power. I've found in a more forward saddle position. So it's good in that regard. But with these enduro bikes that are much more extreme like this, right? Like you have to kind of disassociate those almost like, would you say so?
Like the saddle position with the hand position.
Because it's like two entirely different bikes that you're basically riding in those.
Yeah, the way I look at it is like instead of maybe the old way would be you set your saddle in relation to your bottom bracket for whatever your pedaling dynamics are, and then you put the bars, you locate the bar based on the saddle. Right,
Yeah.
like I've seen, like you put your elbow on the seat and your end of your finger touches the bar.
Yeah.
That's completely valid. You should do that. And then you have a certain amount of bar drop, right?
Yeah.
No, like the way I look at it is like definitely everything people know about their saddle position, keep that. That's important. And then we locate your hands in relation to the bottom bracket.
Not in relation to the
Yeah,
saddle.
so of course, like the other end, the top of that triangle, there's a relationship, right?
Sure.
But that's a result. It's not like a driver.
Yep.
So what I reckon, and you picked this right up, it's like pedaling is hinging. Pedaling happens in a hinge in the saddle too. So if when all you guys shorten your stem and you go, oh, I'm cramped, I would suggest that you hinge as if you have a longer stem or whatever makes you comfortable, and you bend your arm a hair more.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
Be more aero that way too.
That's right.
Right.
Those enduro climbs.
Exactly. Lee, like I've said this before, you make, I can see the Matrix now after working with you. It's amazing.
That's pretty rad. Well, you have Kung Fu, right?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
it got downloaded.
Like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
have
know Kung
Kung
Fu. But a bunch of people are chiming in right now on the live feed just saying how much you've helped them before, by the way, which is
right on.
awesome. So, and I hope we've represented the majority of the questions with the different things that we've asked here. One person's asking about getting tense in turns, that sort of stuff, and descending. And go back to what we talked about with scalloping in those turns and, placing, that weight and doing that stuff. It'll
The
help. a lot.
pogo stick. Think about a pogo stick. If you're turning on a pogo stick, it's impossible. But if you're moving, it's so much better.
So go back and check that out. Lee, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was fun.
Where can people follow you, find out more about you, do that sort of stuff?
LeeLikesBikes.com is a good place to go. And then we're on Facebook, Lee McCormack on Facebook, but better is Lee Likes Bikes on Facebook.
Yep.
And if you want to nerd out in a pretty significant way, we have an online school at llbmtb.com, and that has the full fit system, including calculators to model your bike before you buy it to make sure it fits you, and it has the full skill, everything we talked about in detail with videos.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Thank you, Lee.
you're welcome.
thank you.
Super fun.
It's been awesome having you. Thank you so much. And if you are listening to this podcast, first of all, if you're watching live, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That really helps. And that way more people can see this video and more people can get faster, increase the shred quotient of the world. That would be awesome.
Exactly. It's my mission.
And you're doing it. And then also, if you're just listening to this podcast, share it with your friends. Submit your triathlon, cycling, mountain biking, whatever questions you have to trainerroad.com/podcast. You can go there and submit them on a form. We'll see him next week, and then we'll be recording. Nate, you won't be here next week, but we'll have we might have Pete jump in. We'll see how that goes. But we'll have a podcast here next week, Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific, and we're looking forward to having you all here. Lee, thanks a bunch, man.
You're welcome. It's
You're
always fun.
the best.
Yep, we'll talk to you all later. See ya.
Bye-bye.